his future thinking. Sorry, difficult to manage. And to do so, I decided to deal with the concept of risk society because precisely deal with the future attitude of societies toward risk. Indeed, describe how society are increasingly and constantly preoccupied with the future, indeed to cope with risk and disasters coming from it. And also, this theory shows how there is a collective reaction, resilience in modern days, while in the past probably there was a more individual perception and reaction to risk. Medieval history generally dealt with this topic from a collective point of view, trying to study how communities or society dealt with disasters or risks. And the personal perspective has only been engaged by the history of emotion. That's why I decided to try to cope with it from an economic history perspective. And it's interesting to study the late medieval ages for doing so, because there is a new future arise in this period, described by a medieval historian as the result of this profound change that brought the future from being an eschatological fixed time to a more earthly and open time, seen by economic actors as a future of possibilities. And that's the moment where merchants started to see this time as a time of opportunities. And economic historians from the 70s, 80s started to see this future attitude as one of the symptoms of capitalism. In my analysis, I decided to focus on the future expectations of these people, namely the imagined future that they created in order to try to forecast risks coming from, indeed, given situation or events. Namely, these future expectations are built from gathering informations, processing them through the knowledge, namely culture, experience, and instinct, and then, indeed, they result in these future expectations. The focus of my paper will be to reconstruct a biography of a medieval broker to see what are the future attitudes of medieval people concerning risk management, and also how risk was perceived individually from people in the past, and how these people use knowledge to face risk in everyday life, business, indeed, and also private life. Medieval brokers have been studied for the Middle Ages from an institutional point of view, indeed through the analysis of insurances, court records, and what is missing indeed is the individual point of view, analyzing biographies of these people to understand why they became brokers. Still, historians define them as risk experts that were able indeed to develop more and more risk mitigating practices between the 13th and the 15th centuries. What is essential for these economic actors is to manage properly the network in an efficient way, and also to hold knowledge concerning risk or internal and external dynamic of the market where they operated. But I would like to start from how people from the time perceive brokers, and I decided to use Cotrugli to understand how was perceived indeed this job. And he reports, when the Genoese become poor because they are disgraced by fortune, or the Catalans, most of them become pirates. The Venetians and the Ragusans become beggars, but the Florentines become brokers or work in one or other profession to restore their own business. So, in light of this, we can see how medieval people perceive these brokers in a negative point of view, precisely as Florentines that didn't manage to trade properly, and they suffer a considerable loss, or they went in bankruptcy. And this perspective, this negative one, has been enforced by the historians of late medieval brokers, mainly for Italy I'm dealing with, and saying, yes, this is the perception, this is the case, but also I will add also the merchants without a capital to invest. So people invested capitals of other people. And To analyze this point of view, I decided to deal with the biography of Talleyrand di Paolo Mattei, who was a young broker working in Venice between the 1396 and the 1400. We don't have enough material to fully reconstruct his biography. We can say that we have 18 letters from the Datini archive, covering the period 1395 and 1400, and several references from other correspondences that can help us to reconstruct barely the life of this broker between 1389 and 1400. What we can say about his early life is not much. We can say that he became orphan of father, and this caused him to suffer a great loss from the perspective of opportunities. Indeed, he didn't receive education from the father on time, and for this reason, he had to become an apprentice of another merchant that has pity of him, apparently for what is written in the Datini's letters. Namely, he became the apprentice of Lorenzo Bianciardi, that was a partner of Francesco di Marco Datini. Then he appears in the accounting books as tavoliere, so money changer. But my question is, why did he become a broker? And that's what makes it interesting, because he became broker because he robbed his own boss. So in the autumn 1395, he stole 120 items for the company of his own manager, and he escaped with these to Ferrara in order to sell them. But in a few days, he has been immediately arrested and imprisoned. For saving the son from this situation, his mother, Monna Giovanna, tried to reach an agreement with the boss in order to pay back for the damage that he caused. But it's not clear how these dynamics evolved. We can say that probably she gave away a part of her dowry that at the time it was invested in the Florentine public debt. It was amounting of 800 florins. Or probably she occurred in a debt with Francesco di Marco Datini in order to pay back the freedom of the son. Still, we can say that he was free in the 33rd of February 1396. But still, he had a problem now. He had to pay back the debt. And this is the reason, indeed, why he decided to become a broker. We find exactly when he started his activity, and is in the 14th of March 1395. He defined himself as a sensale di cambi e sensale di sicurtà, so money changing broker and insurance broker. Still, from the letters we can reconstruct precisely his activity, because his story, before all, is based on his startup, so Avviamento. We have a beginning of his activity, and he mainly wrote his letters to ask for recommendation, ask for money to the mother, or indeed for trying to get in touch with nodes of his network. And also, what's interesting, we see how he tried to do that, but across the letters we understand that he didn't make it. He's always asking for more money, more, and he doesn't really have an income, apparently. So looking at the temporalities of this person, namely how he structured his perception of time, we can see how out of 438 references, 248 are related to the future. So we see that these letters are future-oriented, but the reason for this can be two. One, the practice itself of writing letters. When you write letters, you expect the addressee to read the materials, in the contents of the letters way later or in the future. But otherwise can be also his obsession with planning or trying to understand how to improve his own situations. And looking at the topics of his future expectations, we can see how he was strongly interested in the network dynamics. But why? Because he was always asking this for recommendations to Francesco Datini to get him in touch with people from the market. Then we see the second most important topic is his own business, and that's obvious. But then we see how the third one are the elements concerning the economy of the mother, because most of what he expects to gain comes from the debts that, from the loans that he's asking for the mother, saying, can you give me money? Can I have more? I need, but I'm almost okay. Give me more. And also we see that there are formulas related to the future thinking, like may God guard you. And Explicit reference to the future for risk are 14, 10 to political issues, and 4 to epidemics. What I'm going to consider here briefly is network future expectation, is business wants, and what he considers as risk. That is the main point of my paper. Before all, in the network, we see, indeed, as I said, is wish to be recommended, is wish to get in touch with the main nodes that we're trading with Francesco Di Marco Dattini in this market. And also, we can see from these that he was not really inserted in the network of the city, probably because he was not an interesting node, or probably because he was renowned to be the guy that stole the goods from his boss. It's not clear from the letters. Still, this network is obviously the main source of information for Talerano, together with the rumors of the Rialto market. This is the visualization of this network, and we can see how the two main nodes are Francesco Di Marco Dattini and the mother, Mona Giovanna, both with 42 mentioning. Then there is another important node that is the wife of Talerano, that was committed by Talerano to collect money from creditors or otherwise to ask for money to members of the family. And in all this network, we see also his partner, Carlo Guidalotti. That will be interesting because he frauded Talerano. When he was starting to gain something, he decided to take all the money from the company that they had together and escape and bring the money to Florence to support his own family. And the only Venetian in the network is Antonio Di Marino Contarini. That was apparently the most important Venetian in that moment. And he simply asked to Dattini to introduce him to this node. Concerning his business, we see that Talerano was affected by a chronic lack of capital. He's always asking for indeed money from the mother. He's always planning how can she give money to him. For example, you could withdraw your dowry, you can give me a part, then you reinvest it. Watch out not to spend your money that are mine. Is not quite the investor, this broker. But still, we see also how the risk perception here is clear. Everything can be a risk for Talerano. And that's interesting because generally what is considered a good event, the birth of a child, here is seen as a great damage. He started to say, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have a child. And you're like, okay, it's not what I consider damage. Apparently for this business, it was. Otherwise, it's sickness. He has a fever that doesn't allow him to trade. And that's considered, again, as a risk. But talking more about his risk perception, we can see how he doesn't talk about risk, but he talks about damage. So he talks about the effects of what can be a loss or a risk. He's talking about effects in this case. And risk doesn't appear a single time in this correspondence. We have 5 references to damage, and 3 of them are referring to grande, so huge, great damage. Still, what he considered damage was the misbehavior of a partner, indeed that escaped with money, or how Dattini could invest badly the money of a mother that could make him suffer, indeed. But even more interesting is the concept of gran danno, that can be indeed translated as great damage, but is also the term used by these merchants, not only by Talerano, but also other members of the network of Dattini, to define disasters. Generally, indeed, is a damage that is such entity that no recovery is possible. Indeed, they always mention God in front of these situations, or they ask a strong support from other merchants. And in the case of Talerano, we can see that he defined as great damage the fear that stopped him. So it's not really a disaster, but in his light is a disaster. And also the possible peace between the Duke of Milan with a league that was trying to stop him to conquer the Italian peninsula, because it would have affected his quotations in the Florentine public debt, or better, the quotation of the dowry of a mother. Then there are other risks that are not defined as such by Talerano, but still are to be considered risks, consider the mentality of the period. For example, a Paris attack from Genoa or a plague epidemic. And that's here where I focus to understand indeed how he defined this risk. What are these risks for him? And that's interesting because the piracy attack from Genoa was affecting an insurance that he has underwritten in the August 1399. And here we see how this Genoese ship robbed all the goods inside the ship that indeed he insured. And still, he suffered 40 ducats of damage. That is not a consistent sum for the average merchant in Venice at the time, but still, he defined it as a great cost, a cost aside for his business. So we see here, even like the smallest of the possible damage coming from piracy for him is a huge loss. And also, what's interesting is how he approached the plague. The Gran Moria of 1400, that is a plague pandemic that killed 16,000 people in circa 3 months in Venice. We see from this risk how he was able still to collect information, knowledge concerning the plague. He has precise data concerning that. And we don't know if it's a knowledge based on rumors from the market or from institutions of which we don't have information about. Still, for giving you an example, this is the description of a plague that is quite detailed. Indeed, it says, "As I heard, you are with your family in Bologna. You did well to escape the corrupt air, which, as they say, here is heavy and dark, watching people die in Florence. May God, by His grace, provide for you. And in the same way, many people are dying in Venice. On certain days, 100 have died this month, but I heard that often between 30 and 40 die of boils. May God, by His mercy, keep His hands on our heads." And this is interesting because he described the epidemiology of a plague, gives a quantification of the victims, and are precise information that indeed are needed to trade. But why we can say that the plague was considered as a risk by this merchant, despite he didn't use the term damage, of great damage for doing that? We understand that from the reference from the letters. Indeed, Talleyrano's daughter died out of this plague, and merchants tried to collect money for bury the child because he didn't have money for bury her. Still, also we see how probably he died of this plague. Indeed, after the only letter written in this period, we don't have information about Talleyrano anymore, but we can't be sure about it. Still, we also see the effects on the market of this pandemic. Indeed, he writes, "The dying has not arrived in Florence, and one could profit little or nothing here in Venice." And for concluding, I will say that Talleyrano's activity is a continuous struggle with debt, that he tried to solve increasing the debt, indeed asking for money to Dattini or asking money from the mother. And still, we can't see enough about his activity as a broker, so how he moved in this market, and that would have been interesting. But we can do that with all the correspondences that will create an interesting comparison, indeed, between all these biographies that can emerge from the different correspondences of brokers. And also, what's interesting is the risk perception of this person, not only traditional dangers like piracy, epidemics, or war are evident here, but also everyday life risks. Indeed, a small company can be affected by the birth of a child, as we've seen, or otherwise by a fever. So based on the wealth of a person, we see a different risk perception, showing also elements that can make us wonder about the inequality presented by risk perception. And still, further research is indeed necessary to establish if this was not a normal biography, a normal prostitute to become broker or not. So, thank you for your attention.
Grazie Nicolò. E adesso lasciamo la parola a Benedetto Ligorio dell'Università La Sapienza di Roma, che ci parla di economia della connettività marittima, commercio e assicurazioni della Repubblica di Ragusa, Dubrovnik nel Rinascimento europeo. Prego.
Okay. Utilizzerò la mia lingua madre, eventualmente abbiamo la traduzione simultanea e potete ovviamente, la discussione può svolgersi in qualsiasi lingua, non c'è problema. Una cosa, prima di iniziare, ringrazio la Fondazione Datini per l'ospitalità, la direttrice scientifica della Fondazione per l'ospitalità e sono veramente lieto di essere qui a Prato per la seconda volta nella mia esperienza accademica. La mia presentazione riguarda il sistema di connettività marittimo della Repubblica di Ragusa, che spesso è stata configurata come città-stato. Si pensi alla storiografia britannica Carter. Non è esattamente così, come è dimostrato sia dallo storico italiano Antonio Di Vittorio, che a Ragusa ha dedicato gran parte della sua vita scientifica, Dubrovnik ovviamente, da non confondere con Ragusa in Sicilia, e sia dallo storico jugoslavo Barisa Krekic. Il sistema portuale di Ragusa infatti si configura non solo attraverso il porto di Dubrovnik, ma anche attraverso quello di Maliston, porto di stagno nella documentazione, Gruj, porto di Gravosa, Lopud, porto di mezzo, e Zavtat, porto di Ragusa Vecchia. In particolare è importante non confondere il porto di Ragusa Vecchia, come purtroppo accade in alcuni ambiti storiografici, con il porto di Ragusa Dubrovnik. Uno corrisponde all'attuale sobborgo di Zavtat e l'altro corrisponde all'attuale Dubrovnik. Questi 4 porti avevano un'enorme portata marittima. Il sistema amministrativo della Repubblica si sviluppava in più uffici, compreso l'ufficio di navigazione e quello di dogana, che sono i 2 uffici più importanti per la connettività marittima della Repubblica, al quale si aggiungono i consolati di Levante, gli uffici del sale, del vino e della moneta, e tutto un sistema finanziario teso al supporto delle attività finanziarie della Repubblica, quindi la Cassa di Santa Maria Maggiore, che era la Cassa della Repubblica, la Cassa del Rettore, la Cassa della Zecca e la Cassa delle Opere Pie, che era una cassa ecclesiastica. Il network marittimo di Ragusa si configurava come un network di trasformazione ed esportazione di prodotti. I prodotti venivano prima importati come materie prime attraverso le rotte balcaniche e dopodiché esportati in quella che si può configurare come Europa occidentale, quindi venivano importati dai territori occupati dall'impero ottomano. In particolare nel caso cerealicolo l'importazione si sviluppa attraverso network semplici, rotte dirette, importazione a corto raggio, con una prevalenza dei mercati balcanici occupati dagli ottomani, e c'è un monopolio pubblico su queste importazioni che sono strategiche per la sopravvivenza della Repubblica. Si tratta dei generi alimentari, fondamentalmente, soprattutto grano. Quindi i porti di approvvigionamento sono Lecce, Durazzo, Valona, Corfù, Arta, Corinto, Napoli di Romania, Salonicco, Volos, Costantinopoli, Candia e Rodi. Diversa è la configurazione di importazione dei prodotti dalle materie prime da trasformare. Si tratta prevalentemente di lana, cammellotti e così via, che poi venivano trasformati e inviati come lana di cammello e così via, e veniva poi trasformata in cammellotti, ad esempio, e inviate verso l'Europa occidentale. In questo caso i network sono complessi, con reti integrate, una netta interdipendenza dei mercati balcanici, un'area di importazione proveniente dal Mar Nero, un'area di importazione dall'Egeo e dall'Adriatico, e il commercio era era totalmente libero e gestito da privati attraverso peculiari accordi stabiliti dalla Repubblica di Ragusa. Questo costituiva un grande vantaggio, attraverso il Giumruc, un grande vantaggio della Repubblica di Ragusa su altri porti, ad esempio quello veneziano, nella importazione di materia prima dal territorio balcanico occupato dagli ottomani. C'è dunque una configurazione di regioni di importazione, quella della Dobrugia dal Mar Nero, quella della Danubiano-Carpatica, quella macedone, quella del sud-est adriatico e ovviamente un'importanza spesso sottovalutata del porto balcanico di Rodosto, laddove troppo spesso si evidenzia l'importanza di Costantinopoli, si dimentica questo porto che può apparire solo all'apparenza secondario e che invece è un enorme porto di approvvigionamento di materie prime per la Repubblica di Ragusa. Il sistema, definito quello che è il sistema di importazione, possiamo definire quella che è la polizza assicurativa della Repubblica. Questa, come ben evidenziano gli storici Alberto Tenenti e in particolare anche la moglie Branislava Telenti, meno nota, inizia a configurarsi con una certa stabilità a partire dal 1550 circa. Nella prima seconda metà del Cinquecento i documenti cominciano ad essere molto standardizzati, una standardizzazione che è schematica: data e luogo, nome del procuratore commerciale e dell'operatore che agisce in proprio, nome del proprietario delle merci ed eventuale indicazione delle città di provenienza, tipologia e nome dell'imbarcazione, luogo di imbarco, indicazione della quantità della tipologia delle merci, nome dell'armatore e del capitano, clausole, eventuali clausole, luogo di destinazione, valore assicurato, elenco degli assicuratori, tasso assicurativo. Questa standardizzazione del sistema assicurativo avviene in questo periodo, mentre in precedenza i documenti che si analizzano agli inizi del Cinquecento e ancora più nel Quattrocento hanno ancora delle caratteristiche variabili, soggette a di volta in volta una rielaborazione più o meno letteraria del notaio che è pubblico, statale, registra tutte le assicurazioni. E uno dei vantaggi della Repubblica di Ragusa è appunto quello di avere una registrazione sistematica dei noli e securità, ovvero di avere sistematicamente tutte le assicurazioni marittime di esportazione verso tutti i porti europei e mediterranei. È particolarmente interessante per me in questo caso ovviamente andare ad analizzare i porti più vicini, quelli di Ancona, di Venezia, quelli pugliesi, ovvero quelli dell'area adriatica che interessano la connettività tra i Balcani e la penisola italiana. Di solito i documenti sono in italiano o in latino, qualche volta si riscontrano polizze assicurative in altre lingue, ad esempio il ladino. È il caso di questo interessante documento, datato 10 Kislev 1542, ovvero 15 novembre 1581, con l'utilizzo della lingua ladina nella polizza di carico. Ed è interessante l'interculturalità, ovvero l'attraversamento e il superamento delle identità confessionali ed etniche in una complessa interconnessione mediterranea che travalica ogni identitarismo. In questo caso i mercanti che commerciano sono ottomani, commerciano direttamente con Ancona, siamo nel 1581, quindi si tratta di Stato della Chiesa, con utilizzo di naviglio veneziano e un carico gestito da un console degli ebrei della Repubblica di Ragusa, ovvero è un mercante raguseo, marrano tra l'altro, che si trova a Narenta, una zona fluviale, quindi è interessante anche perché si tratta di un'assicurazione marittima con un porto fluviale, che è il porto della Narenta. È un documento raro tra i tanti documenti assicurativi che sono in prevalenza in italiano e in latino, Proprio per questo è un documento interessante. Ovviamente sulla base dell'analisi quantitativa è molto più importante verificare il processo di analisi quantitativa e dunque la quantità di merci assicurate. Da questo punto di vista ho sviluppato e sto sviluppando tuttora un database di tutte le assicurazioni marittime della Repubblica di Ragusa. In questo caso vedete in elenco il 1591 ed è interessante proprio perché dal 1589 al 1591, come evidenzia Tenenti e dove si ferma il testo di Alberto Tenenti, vi è una variazione della composizione etnica, ma anche del volume d'affari nel commercio interadriatico della Repubblica di Ragusa, con una contrazione di alcune componenti etniche e l'espansione di altre, ma proprio questa interconnessione interetnica e interconfessionale va a generare un processo di resilienza economica che invece travolge molti altri porti adriatici. Dunque, la struttura di questo database si sviluppa sul modello dei documenti assicurativi su data, nome del mercante, nome degli assicuratori, città d'origine, destinazione, prodotti e quantità, armatore della nave, percentuale assicurativa, valore assicurato, segnature archivistiche e note ulteriori. Nell'analizzare invece la microtemporalità, spesso ci si sofferma sulla microstoria. Ho preferito in questo caso evidenziare la microtemporalità, ovvero analizzare l'esportazione di un solo giorno verso una città e capire come si configura un traffico commerciale di un solo giorno. Ad esempio, il 14 aprile 1597 l'esportazione da Ragusa verso diverse città, si sviluppa secondo il parametro qui, secondo i grafici qui indicati, dunque verso Musalan, al confine tra Impero Ottomano e Persia, se non erro, prevalentemente cammellotti, verso Sofia, cera, verso Sarajevo, cuoi, verso Skopje, monete e importazione verso Ragusa, pepe. E un altro elemento è quello di verificare esattamente come si sviluppa il traffico commerciale e a quanto corrisponde il valore assicurato rispetto al rischio. Questo si può fare perché talvolta nelle clausole delle polizze assicurative abbiamo il valore complessivo della merce e il valore assicurato. Non avviene sempre, ma generalmente questo valore è abbastanza standardizzato. Ad esempio sappiamo quanto valevano i cammellotti e quanto venivano invece assicurati. Dopodiché si seguiva grosso modo quello schema nel corso delle assicurazioni. Quindi abbiamo una tipologia di merci assicurate, lane lavorate, 53 tavole, pelli, 190 pezze e altri prodotti tessili non pervenuti caricati sulla nave Galeone Sant'Elena, armatore Nicola Rusco, luogo di ormeggio l'isola di Giuppana, che è un'isola della Repubblica, attraverso il porto di Ragusa, dunque, con una portata di carra di 500, quindi si tratta di un argosi, di un galeone consistente, un valore di rischio è di 6.463 ducati, il valore assicurato è di 10.237 ducati, il valore reale di tutti i prodotti è 16.700 ducati, si tratta di un solo carico. E d'altro canto ho teso anche a evidenziare, laddove è possibile, le attività mercantili delle donne e le attività mercantili di alcune minoranze etniche, in questo caso dei sefarditi. È stato un elemento nuovo rispetto a una mia precedente relazione su questo tema. Nel 1591 le merci assicurate da Ragusa verso Ancona ammontano a 14.600 ducati in cammellotti, 2.322 ducati in pelli, 3.231 ducati in pepe e 11.706 ducati in seta. Quindi c'è anche una rilevanza di questo prodotto che comincia a diventare predominante. E le donne mercanti cominciano ad affermarsi, si tratta del 1591, c'è un errore nel testo, le donne mercanti cominciano ad affermarsi e osserviamo che Sara di Salomon Ben Sal assicura per 1.707 ducati, che è una cifra considerevole, Donna Clara d'Aragona per 1.138 ducati, e individuiamo anche un soggetto che ha vissuto un processo di emancipazione dalla religione, ovvero un sefardita convertito, sarebbe definito marrano, che assicura prodotti per 928 ducati, oltremente a Isaac Al-Ghazi e ai grandi mercanti che si muovono nei Balcani, che assicurano su grandi cifre. E è stato interessante proprio ieri una domanda posta da uno storico in sala sul rapporto tra ambiente e cicli climatici e cicli economici, e in effetti mi sono posto anch'io lo stesso problema, ovvero l'interdipendenza tra i cicli stagionali e le assicurazioni marittime. E si evidenzia ovviamente che non solo l'elemento agrario è determinato dai cicli naturali, ma ovviamente anche l'elemento commerciale nella fase precontemporanea è fortemente influenzato dalla condizione sia meteorologica sia dei cicli stagionali, con delle fasi di espansione commerciale e delle fasi invece di quiete commerciale. E il massimo dei processi di esportazione e quindi di assicurazione marittima si sviluppano appunto nei mesi che vanno da ottobre ad aprile, quindi dall'autunno sino alla primavera, mentre le fasi di stabilità marittima di pausa marittima sono quelle di dicembre e di novembre, cioè lo si riscontra costantemente nel corso degli anni, quindi anche i cicli commerciali seguono questa ciclicità che è determinata dai cicli stagionali, dai cicli naturali. Vi sono poi degli investimenti ragusei nei Balcani che si configurano come attività sia di investimento diretto, sia di credito, sia di assicurazione, prevalentemente verso Belgrado, ma anche verso Sofia, con altre regioni che può essere la Dobrugia, Novi Posar, Provadia, Ruše e la regione bosniaca nel suo complesso, quindi Sarajevo. E ancora investimenti finanziari ragusei nei Balcani nel 1619, ancora Belgrado come principale area di investimento, la regione della Dobrugia con 11.450 ducati di investimento e dopodiché Sofia, Sarajevo, il resto della Bosnia, Ruže e Trebinje che è al confine tra Montenegro e Croazia attualmente. Infine il sistema consolare. Su questi investimenti, laddove c'erano delle presenze ragusee, ovviamente c'era una corrispondenza consolare. La corrispondenza consolare di Ragusa è fittissima, sia attraverso le lettere di Levante sia attraverso le lettere di Ponente. Furono proprio questi documenti, i documenti che impressionarono Fernand Braudel, tanto da affermare che attraverso Ragusa si aveva una prospettiva di tutto il Mediterraneo. ed effettivamente i consoli ragusei sparsi in tutto il Mediterraneo e nei Balcani avevano la capacità di convogliare mensilmente informazioni, o settimanalmente dipende, informazioni verso la piccola Repubblica balcanica e adriatica e dunque costituivano un'enorme fonte di questi documenti costituiscono oggi un'enorme fonte di informazione su come nella prima età moderna si configurano i sistemi di comunicazione, quali erano le condizioni economiche delle città balcaniche e adriatiche e dei mercati balcanici e adriatici nella prima età moderna, e questo fino alla fine del Seicento. Dunque i consolati di Ragusa si diramavano per quanto riguarda l'area adriatica ad Ancona, nello Stato della Chiesa, a Pesaro, nei consolati del Ducato di Urbino, i vari consolati nel Regno di Napoli, enormemente influenzati dalla presenza ragusea per approvvigionamento di materie prime, quindi Bisceglie, Barletta, Bari, Brindisi, Castro, Carfu, Gollipoli, Lecce, Molfetta, Manfredonia, Mola di Bari, Otranto, Ortona, Peschici, Brindisi, Lecce, Otranto e Lanciano, un'enorme rete consolare su tutti i porti pugliesi, e infine un consolato a Valona. È interessante anche in questo caso avere una documentazione relativa a Valona, laddove di solito nelle fonti veneziane si ha una documentazione relativa a Durazzo. Quindi questi documenti incrociati consentono anche di ricostruire quella che era la modernità di un altro Stato che ha pochi documenti per l'età moderna, che è quella dell'attuale Albania, ad esempio. E lo stesso discorso vale per tutti gli Stati balcanici. Vi ringrazio.
Grazie a Benedetto Ligorio. La nostra terza relazione. Grazie. Abbiamo bisogno di questo. La nostra terza relazione è quella di Eronia Pons, Juan Carpio della Universidad de Sevilla, The Tribunal of the Inquisition in Mallorca and the Bankruptcy Induced in the Business of Mallorcan Jewish Converts. Lascio la parola a Eronia che parla per entrambi i relatori. Prego.
Grazie. The concept of induced bankruptcy analyzed below, it is introduced in the context of the debate of the factor and mechanism that determine more or less organized outbreak of violence against minorities, especially wealthy minorities. In the present case, the Inquisition attacked on the economic elite of the Mallorcan minority of Jewish converts in Mallorca called Jueves, after a long period of painful coexistence, unleashed a physical and economic repression that led to the bankruptcy of their companies, the loss of assets and property, and also of their financial investment, which caused great commotion in the business world. Our have therefore termed this phenomenon an induced bankruptcy, as it was not purely the result of the economic and business dynamics, but rather that was an exogenous factor of an institutional nature. In the 17th century, the Inquisition was already fully aware of the existence of a group that was acting clandestinely outside Catholicism. The situation changed radically during the 1670s. In September 1677, a process was initiated with the first detention, and which peaked in February 1678 with the mass imprisonment of a significant number of the Jewish population. The judicial process, known as the complicity of the 1679, lasted over a year and led to 5 autos de fe held in April and May 1679, with 219 accused being reconciled, which entailed the loss of their property confiscated by the Inquisition. We based our analysis on our own data taken from such a comprehensive sources as the Tanteo, Roche estimate, of the Tribunal of the Inquisition in Mallorca, date 20th of May 1680. The list of the accused with a disagreed valuation of their property constituted a total amount near 1 million libras, Mallorcan libras. This amount on capital had to have repercussion for the island economy and marked a turning point, initiating a new phase. The intention here is to analyze the impact that the institutional attack had on a minority that enjoy a position as an economic elite. The profound disruption of this group business venture induces bankruptcy affects first, financial transaction. Second, variety of the sector, including trading companies. Third, the real estate market. The sources used to investigate this matter come from the Archivo Histórico Nacional and Archiu de Reina de Mallorca. In the former, as well as the well-known processes related to fairs, the authors have focuses on exclusively economic documentary items, in which, moreover, a good part of the information is quantified. In this respect, it was highlighting codices known as libros becerros. This contained the fundamental aspect of the confiscated property, census, annuities, and real estate property. Also, of great interest for the economic analysis is in an extensive book with abundant information related to different aspects of the confiscated goods. These books also provide important information on the origin of these annuities census, who was involved in the loan and the evolution of the such loan with different legal mechanisms of transmission. Let's see first of all the impact on the financial sector. The autos de fe and the property seized from the Mallorcan traders from 1677 to 1679 allowed the Mallorcan tribunal to appropriate a large amount of annuities, census. According to the tribunal's own rough estimate of confiscated property in 1670, made by the Inquisition of Mallorca, 73.22% of the circa 1 million Mallorcan libras pertain to financial products or credit operation. Almost 50% came from public debt of the Universitat, the Council of Capital of Mallorca, in its 3 different forms: universal consignación, vía NAP, and derechos nuevos annuities. There were at least 3 waves of mass sale of debt by the tribunal, first in November 1679, for the payment of the 50,000 pesos to Viceroy Conde de Villar. Second wave of sale and ready-made censors in June 1681 to pay the widow Comtesse of Villar what was still owed to her husband. The third wave, evident in the Libro de Becerro, corresponds to 1683, in order to make a payment of 66,000 to Frances Trujol. Censors sold for a capital of 70,000 libras. Most of what was gained from this transaction was handed over to the crown. This phenomenon had an enormous impact and was a critical element in the economic collapse of the Jewish convert community, after being deposited of their main business and source of health. On the other hand, the fact that this important financial sector changed hands in a surprising, rapid, and intense fashion, and undoubtedly generate uncertainty and confusion in the island economy. In second place, it was produced the slump in the commercial activity. Although the scale of the business of the large olive oil exporter and fabric importers was quite different from that of the merchant of the small retail bodegas, the repression of the Inquisition and the confiscation of goods had an enormous impact both spheres of business. The shops, bodegas, the physical premises where a small-scale business was managed from, such as the retail of the clothing, the arranging of small credits and pawnbroking, and which were also sometimes used to manage large-scale business, the export of oil and purchase of clothing from outside the island. Experiences the initial surprise, disorientation, and induced bankruptcy. The foreign trade of the Jewish community lost 80% of its capacity. This vacuum was occupied by other groups, especially the nobility, which, after the inquisitorial repression, was responsible for 40% of all export. The weight of the Jews in the overall export market fell from 26% to 5%. Regarding other businesses such as insurance, with the Jews most linked to financial activity having been arrested, imprisoned, and having had their property confiscated, most of the Caixes de Seguridad and caixons, insurance company, the name insurance companies in Mallorca, went bankrupt. The result in the short term was the disappearance of their role in the insurance business, and they had completely dominated. The confiscation impoverished an important group of families of merchants and created a climate of fear over the visibility of their business dealing. This led to a reduction in their percentage of participation, which fell to 36% of insured capital and 33% of income from premiums in the 1680 decades. A decade in which, moreover, there were other episodes of inquisitorial persecution. The Jewish share also fell among insurance companies to 55% percent of insured capital and 42% of the premium collected. And finally, certainly, we can see the change to the real estate market. The real estate market was another economic field of great importance that would be substantially affected by the confiscation. The primary concern to have a home took precedent over the recovery of economic activity. The total value of houses, orchards, plots of land, and rural property known as rafales was established at 101,000 libras, which accounted for 10.5% of the all property and goods seized. According to the evaluation made, it appeared that the accused owned a total of 83 properties, including houses and bodegas belong to 62 owners. The Inquisition was in no hurry to sell off this property and was able to gain a healthy income by renting them out. And one consequence of this was that it enabled some of the Jews to recover the homes that they had been deprived of by repurchasing the same properties. The corruption that had been very present since the beginning of the confiscation with regard to goods and household possession can also be observed in the purchase and sale of real estate, thereby creating additional cost. Numerous testimonies confirm private agreements reached in order to channel important amounts to the inquisitor. The interest in maintaining their home led them to account for 51% of the leases agreed in 1679. Almost half, therefore 49%, were tenants who did not belong to the Jewish minority. Hence, it does not seem that there was a strong demand for the houses in the Jewish neighborhood, nor does it appear that the Inquisition acted with urgency or exerted much pressure in order to exploit these properties. All of these circumstances must have been influential in the fact that the Jews gradually recovered their own homes. And in the conclusions, generally speaking, it is accepted that the island entire economy was affected. The profound deterioration was clearly evident among the Jews, the Mallorcan minority of Jews converts who had been the victims of the persecution. On being deprived of all their property, many of them were condemned to ruin from the point of view of their business activities, falling into that our half-term in an induced bankruptcy. That is, an economic interruption or paralysis arising not from business management, but rather from external factors of an institutional nature. The most important and influential asset expropriated by the Inquisition in relation to this situation of bankruptcy were the real estate properties. The confiscation of houses did not only create great difficulties for the Jews' domestic life, but also for any other activity. This was aggravated by the loss of the bodegas, shops that also functioned as center of their economic transaction. The same occurred with the financial sector. The Swedes participate actively in lending to public institutions. The public debt passed into the hands of the Inquisition, and part of it was sold to meet payment pledged to the crown. Moreover, this elimination, at least temporarily, of the traditional lender made it more difficulty to obtain private credit, in particular small loans. The economic repression on the Inquisition was permanently accompanied by corruption, which existed in all areas and which signified an additional cost on top of the Swedish losses. The analysis of the prevailing circumstances led one to reflect on a number of questions that are initiated to continue examining and delve deeper into these issues. In general, and above all in the case of this particular study, it could be asked whether the activity of the church, channeled through the Inquisition, was exclusively oriented to acting as a rentier and benefiting from an unearned income. If the censors were not reinvested and if new credit were not provided, the economic strangulation of institutions and private individuals was inevitable. Who could exercise this indispensable function in the financial market? Did some Swedes recover this role? This question led us into another scenario that it would be convenient to address with the appropriate sources. Thank you very much.
Grazie a Eronia e Juan. E adesso facciamo una pausa di 20 minuti. Naturalmente, se ci sono domande, utilizzate ormai il ben conosciuto modulo. Grazie, fra poco. Certo. Marian Kowalewski, Safle, Pons, vabbè, più o meno. Questo era per te. Eronia. Aspettiamo anche. Figurati, anche lui è andato per lo stesso motivo. Con Niccolò Zennaro e quindi chiamo subito Max Safley. Vieni. Ok. Max Safley. Prego.
Niccolò, thank you for your paper, first of all. I have two questions that may or may not be related depending upon how you want to take them. And the first has to do with brokers. If I understood you correctly, you said that brokers work to mitigate risk. Subject to my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong. And that made me wonder about your particular broker, Talorano. Given how little we know about him, the lack of sources, can you unpack a bit more for us his activities? And the reason that I ask that question is because my notion of a broker is that they work not to mitigate risk, but to facilitate exchange. And those are not exactly the same thing. Not all brokers are alike, hence I return to Talorano, and if we could learn a little bit more about him. So first question. And the second question has to do with, and this is how it relates, in my mind at least, has to do with agency, okay? So you gave us a very interesting kind of breakdown of Talorano's references to the future in the correspondence that survived, and I was struck by, hang on just a sec, was it 248 references, you said, to the future? And I thought to myself, okay, he thinks about the future, but we all think about the future. The fact that we think about the future is less important to my way of thinking than how we think about the future. And so as you went forward and then talked about some of the different contexts, the ways in which I was particularly taken, you seemed to spend a fair amount of time with his references to epidemics, to disease. And I thought to myself, Where's the agency in this? Okay, so he talks about it, but these are always associated with events that are God-given. God forfend. God has sent this. It seems clear on the basis of that at least by the 14th century, eschatology is certainly not dead. It hasn't been replaced by some other way of thinking about the future. So where is his sense of agency in all of that? By agency, I mean what human beings can do, what he can do, what his correspondents can do to, well, to again conflate the terms that I've been trying to hold separate for this conference, to mitigate rather the risk that is associated with these and other kinds of catastrophic events. So those are my questions.
Grazie.
Thank you for your question, before all. Am I the only one? No, it's step by step, apparently. Yeah, okay. And so I will try to reply to your question. I've been asked to be brief. Will be difficult. And yeah, you asked indeed about how brokers try to mitigate risk. The point is, in this moment, apparently the job being brokers try to give as much information as possible to the traders in order to deal in a specific market, providing them with information about what's happening, what's not happening, what are possible risks or dangers that can arise from political situations or from specific elements. For example, there are references to, in this period there are more shipwrecks than usual, so we should fix our contracts. And that's the second part of how we mitigate risk. We are building contracts or we are checking contracts in order to decrease the risk that the traders that they are collaborating with, they have to face. So I think that's like their operations in mitigating risk. That, yeah, I agree with you that it's like more make the business go smoothly, but at the same time it's also a way for decreasing the risk that these people can face without this kind of informations. And concerning the second questions, that's a really important question in the sense, in facing with risk, not only this broker, but also a lot of businessmen for this period, they call back the agency of God facing disasters. Indeed, in my dissertation, I call them mercantile prayers, because when they face risk, they stop to use God as a sort of formula, like may God guard you. That doesn't mean much for them, but start to say, may God restore the damages coming from this disaster and may forgive the people that died out of it. So they become more complex in defining what God can do for them and also how can support or restore their businesses. In the case of a human agency, it's not clear because in the case of Talleyrand, it's all related to instructions. So it's not clear what is the agency of Talleyrand in these instructions, because he's always giving instructions, but the mother in the beginning follows the instructions, say, yeah, I'm gonna send you money, it's fine. But at some point, these instructions are not sustainable anymore for the mother. She became so poor that she had to work as a servant for Datini for paying back the debt. And when you see him operating the market, in the really few occasions, you see that the agency is weird. It's more other people do things and they try to get in. And so I would say that it's not clear the human agency in here. It's clear the agency of God in the situation of disaster and risk. Have I replied the question? Satisfied? Okay.
Katia.
Well, thank you, Niccolo, for a very well-structured, very thoughtful paper. My question is rather simple. I know you come from a project that tries to think about what it means to think about the future, so I'm not sure whether this question should be for you or for Jeroen, but I think that you have a very good case to make here. We always think that if you can think about the future, you can kind of accommodate for what comes next. Of course, if you meet most of my family, you would know that thinking about the future doesn't mean that people actually can take care of themselves or make any provisions whatsoever to avoid what's coming in the future, even the most obvious things. So I think you can't have too much faith in people and the thoughts of the future. So basically my question is, can you see in this documentation or any other documentation you may have looked into, whether thinking about the future has actually brought about any better manner of managing risk? Because that would make, I think, a difference for the discussions we've been having right now, right? Because risk is not something that happens to you. You know, having a child may happen to you, but you can also accommodate for that before the child is there. I mean, you know, there's all types of things you can accommodate for. So giving a vision into the future, a perception of the future, readings of the future provide a better way to manage, avoid, accommodate risk before things actually happen to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Katja, for your question. And in this case, I have to say that for understanding how future thinking affects how people deal with the situation of uncertainty, and if it improves their sense of uncertainty in the face of risk, I would say that the correspondence of Talleyrand is not the best case, because it gives information, but it doesn't create future expectation. It gives future statements, but are more related to instructions, so it's not really interesting for doing that. It's interesting, for example, to see how some merchants, in the case of my project, try to use future expectations to improve their sense of certainty. For example, there is this huge node in the Venetian network, is a Tuscan with a double citizenship, and is managing a great slice of the insurance market in Venice. And this merchant started to think about possibilities of piracy in the road between Venice and Spain, and he started to wonder about the value of insurances, and that's super clear as future expectations can affect the insurance market, for example. Indeed, he started to say, yeah, I expect a lot of Catalans started to attack our ships, so I think 5% as insurance is not bad. And that's like a super clear and pragmatic point of view on that. But then there is also the point of view related to epidemics that is super clear. Also a bit in the case of Talleyrand, you see that they say, yeah, I heard that you escaped from Florence and you went to Bologna. So all the plannings linked to how avoid the effects of plague epidemics really helps them to understand how to move in the face of these pandemics. And this is interesting because it helps them also to invest in these pandemics. For example, we started to say, yeah, in Milan now there is a huge epidemic, so probably next year will be a small one. So we should start to collect goods that they will love to have for the next year, so we can increase our possibility of gain. And that's the way in which future can shape their business and also to indeed affect their risk perception and also the way in which they trade.
I really enjoyed it, like reading the paper, because I find the topic is extremely interesting. But in any case, I have two questions, to be honest. The first one is concerning the risk, because it's mainly equated with economic and reputational damage when, like, during your presentation and within your paper. So could we not interpret Talleyrand's actions, for example, gambling on the fragile partnership or something like that, as an evidence of different, possibly opportunistic behavior, or maybe like it's more adventure approach to risk? What I want to say is aligned more with what we call speculative behavior, not risk aversion directly, that would be called economic language. And the one thing, it's a very personal question, the second one, extremely personal. Like Ulrich Beck's The Risk Society concept, it's designed for modernity. So as being interested in the methodological part, precisely within the economic history, the question is, do you see any methodological tension or anachronism in this transplantation or transition of what he applied for reflexity-based, like modern reflexity-based society into the late medieval society? Because when we speak in the qualitative way, they're a bit distinct, like per se. So did you face, so how you justify, let's say in this way, I don't like to use the verb justify in this case because it's aggressive, I guess, but okay. So how do you justify applying this modern reflexity into the late medieval and extremely early modern way of thinking, especially when we're speaking about the Mediterranean economic zone, if we can call it like that? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and yeah, I'll try to reply honestly, because our point of struggle for me, in the sense, if they are risk adverse or not, I think you can say that from how we approach the second question that you mentioned, because I try my methodological approach not to use my conception of what is risk, what is a disaster, but I use their own terminology for doing that. Indeed, I try to collect as much samples from different correspondences to understand what these people perceive as a risk, also how they define a good risk or a bad risk, because they do also that. And that indeed is concerning more the methodological aspect, but also the concept of risk aversion. Sometimes you have explicit references from the letter saying that they are adverse against risk. In the case of this broker, I would say that he's not even trying in a sort of way, because he's not trying to invest for real. He's trying to get opportunities out of the market. But in the end, if you think about it, he doesn't really have a capital to do that. He's always asking for money to the mother or asking loans around. And that brings to wonder, is it, how can we approach this kind of risk risk perception from a point of view of how we invest? And that's make it a little bit how can I say, I'm trying to wonder how is risk aversion, if he's risk averse or not. In this case, I will say, he has not enough capital, he has nothing to lose in that moment, so he seems more willing to risk. So that I would say that's their perspective on that. Have I replied to your questions? Okay, thank you.
Allora, mi raccomando, domande brevi, possibilmente una, e risposte, lui è bravissimo, quindi non c'è problema. Jaco.
Okay, thanks, Niccolò. Very interesting. I have a question about usury, because my own challenge in my own research has always been that I study capital markets. It is obvious that interest is all over the place. Nevertheless, they never ever use the word. The only times you see the concept interest being used is if religious authorities denounce it and tell people that they cannot do this. You see in your sources that they do not really talk about risk. Your main character does not mention risk, mentions damage. And this, to me, suggests that a similar thing is at stake here. They know that they are dealing with risk, but because of this religious and cultural thing called usury, they avoid talking about it. And I would say that this amounts to a methodological problem. You are looking for risk among people who were aware or even conditioned to avoid writing and speaking and identifying with managing risk. So I guess the question is, how can you work with this possible lacuna in your sources? Because at present, it seems as if the conclusion is that risk was unimportant, but of course risk must have been very important. And there might simply be a cultural reason for this.
So, thank you again for your question. Yeah, I see your point. Like, they don't want to talk about usury. And that's clear because there are preachers talking about you shouldn't do usury. There are all these manuals say usury no, please. But the point is, for approaching risk, I think is different. It's more their way of perceiving dangers that is really showing a difference in perceiving risk than what we see as risk. Risk is like the possibility in the future that something can happen to you. And that's something that you can see, for example, the management of this kind of indeed danger from all the kind of documentation, for example, the insurance. But in the case of letters, they can wonder about the future, but mostly when they do this kind of risk management is related to fixing the damages that have affected their business. For example, there is the case of a plague. They can wonder about where is going the plague, but they really talk about the plague when it's really affecting their business. So let's say in a more simplistic way, they wait that the danger hit them and then they start to manage things. So I don't think it's like the fear of managing the word risk. And also I wonder if there was a difference between the cultural aspect, because I analyzed letters from Florentines, letters from Venetians. At the point, Venetians use more the word risk, but still they prefer to talk about damage, because they always wonder about what's happening in their business when it's there, when happen the things. For example, we should invest in this place on the other one concerning, for example, piracy. They do it when the piracy is already striking. Or again, for war, they wonder about war, information about the war, what can happen around plans, but the risk management appears when the damage is there, is evident. So I think that's the reason why you see more damage instead of risk. And the change happens later in the 1450s, 1460s. If you see the other letters, we talk more about risk instead of damage. That's at least what I perceive from analyzing my letters. I don't know if it's really the truth. I will need more and more correspondences to stress that. But still, as now, I can say that's what appears.
Bene, allora David Milli.
Thank you for your presentation. You mentioned traditional and non-traditional risk, such as fever or birth of you mentioned the traditional and non-traditional risks, such as fever or birth of a child. And it's a naive question, but I was wondering why Toledano considers that birth of child is a risk. Do you have explanation or example that provided by his merchant? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And the point is, like, analyzing the letters of this broker, you really realize that these are a risk, like the birth of a child, how he described it. Like, it's not the case like a merchant that I studied for my dissertation that says, like, I'm super happy, I'm gonna have a child, so my future is open, like, this guy, I'm gonna train him, I'm gonna get out a perfect merchant out of him. In this case, it's really a tragedy. Like, he writes to the mother like he has killed someone, so to say, yeah, I'm sorry, a little child is gonna be born in February, I'm so sorry about it. You're like, okay. And so to say, yeah, the problem is that, like, it's such a damage that really my business is not strong enough for support this. So I think the problem is that the cost deriving from the education of this child, and also it's interesting for the concept of like abandonment, child education, because the second reference says like the child is born. The problem is that like now I have to find a way to educate him because I can't abandon him. So probably he thought even abandoning this child because of the problems that were arising economically because of like, indeed, you have to educate him, you have to provide food for them, and yeah, he was not like doing so well for doing that. Okay.
Bene, Juliette, o solo Juliette?
Thank you for your presentation. So my question regards money and capital. I don't know if you have the sources to answer it, but you say he's requesting money, lacking of capital, but he's a money broker, right? So you would say that you have preferential access to ready money and currencies. So from what the words you have in your sources, what is he really lacking of? Is it like, can you tell us a bit more, the difference you would make between money and capital, and what forms of money or what forms of capital? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So the point is, he defined himself to be a broker for money changing, so he could have like probably access to this capital, also like to interact with people for obtaining it. But the problem is that like he defined himself a money changer, but in the letters never appears doing that. The only activity that appears from his business is he did this subscription of the insurance. And the point is like you understand that like in my case, I say that there's a chronic lack of capital because he's always expecting in a sort of way, and it's super sad to say, that the mother dies one day or the other. So he's always say, don't touch the money that you have there, the dowry is going to be mine, so be prudent about it, please. And so you see that like he's expecting to obtain a capital that he can invest, but he's not having it. And also the fact that he's always asking for money, but not for investing them, but simply for surviving, otherwise to pay back debt of other people. Indeed, at some point, he asked more and more money to the mother that is not replying anymore to his letters. Asking, indeed, can you send me money, can you send me money? Because I don't have anyone anymore to ask for, because he asked money to every single person he met in Venice, and no one was giving money anymore. So that's why I would talk about the lack of capital in this case, and also chronic lack of money. He's searching for it, but at some point, clearly, the flow stops because he's not paying back. Did I reply? It's okay.
Salvatore.
Yeah, my question concerns the Asian market. What kind of information have you about this sensitive period? Because after Kublai Khan and the end of the Yuan dynasty, the crisis of the Silk Road is a very peculiar timing for European, especially the Venetian market there. So because we are in face of two interpretations that the maritime road taken advantage because there was a crisis in the Central Asia market. Myself, I try to understand, to follow these economic activities after Kublai Khan, 15th century. But I just read a book of Lavessière, he's a medieval French historian. He wrote a book, important book about that. Also, Marie Favereau is very concerned about this problem. And especially Lavessière, he wrote, it's a crisis, really. There is no more trade with Central Asia. For this Marie Favereau, saying it was the horde, the golden horde that take advantage. That was good because there was the Persian trade in this period. And that was good for Venice. Sorry, you are Venetian, myself, okay? I am very interested in this topic. So what kind of information have you from your merchant Talleyrand? And the second small question could be, what kind of a parallel we could make between Cotrugli and Catalano? Huh? Talleyrand, sorry. What kind of analysis, comparative we could make? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So, It's not easy to reply to the first question, simply because like what we see in Venice are more indirect contacts with these areas. And mainly, I would say the most explicit contacts we see from the slavery market. We see how in this period of the Golden Order is no more, is more Tamerlane the problem. There is Tamerlane that is moving from Asia with a 7-year campaign and is reaching Syria, then reaches the heart of the Mamluk Empire, Sultanate, sorry, and started to push so much that Venice started to ask information. What's happening with Tamerlane? What do we have to do? Where do we have to invest? In what? And the point is there is a skyrocketing in the slavery market. We have a lot of, indeed, slave people to trade. But at the same time, the problem is the plague that is affecting this market. So there is always a lack of these people reaching Venice. And also, for what we see about these movements are more indirect informations. Indeed, Venetians, despite what one can think, are not really aware of what's happening after a certain geographical area. They have rumors about it. Indeed, in Venetian, they always say se dice, se vulgarizza. So they say, or the commoners say, that are index of high uncertainty for them, for this kind of trading. But still, I would say for this area, where are indeed connected to the indirect trading, there is always the connection with Beirut and with the Black Sea. These are the main points from where we get information about it. And concerning the second point, difference between Talleyrand and Cotrugli is difficult to say, because we have a broker that is probably not really aware of what he's doing, he's more doing the things step by step, trying out. And then we have a person that we don't really know so much about his activity as a merchant. We know that he did this manual, and he was an expert on theorizing things. And I would say that it's really difficult to compare these figures. Still, I would say that probably Talleyrand didn't study enough, let's say, for understanding what he should have done for having a good business, and maybe yes, but he was not able to apply this education. I wouldn't be able to reply fully to that. Did I reply?
Bene, allora Isabella.
Good morning to everyone. I will be very brief and with a trivial question. Economic expectations are the other side of risk aversion. Le aspettative economiche sono il rovescio della medaglia dell'avversione al rischio. Può essere utile ragionare in questi termini anche per comprendere meglio il tuo caso di studio, massimizzare il rendimento, minimizzare il profitto, non so. I was wondering. Thank you.
Okay, I reply in English, so I go directly. So the point is, also people that are risk adverse, they can create future expectations. I don't know if it's like what you just asked, because I was wondering. And the point is, future thinking doesn't show people that want to risk more. Sometimes they do that simply because they are terrified of risk. So I wouldn't say that risk aversion is the opposite to future thinking. In the case of my merchants, like not Talleyrand, but like my merchant that I studied, I have one of them that immediately says like, yeah, we have to risk, but I don't like to do that. Immediately is the merchant that creates more future expectations linked to what is going to happen or not. And it's really rare to see when these merchants are risk adverse in this case, because I was looking for explicit reference to that. And I have only 2 of them on 879 letters. So it's really difficult to say that. And maybe could have even said that without really thinking, to like being favorable to risk, but still saying that it was risk adverse is not clear that from the documentation.
Okay, I'm not going to use the linguistic turn that Yoko sort of got on, but I would like to just make one point. Your fellow, this is a comment, this is an observation. Your fellow is a gambler. He's a gambler. Yoko. And that's the problem here, is that you're not going to find, gamblers don't think about the future, they only think about the immediate. They don't think about the future. And that's why they get in such a deep hole. Because if they thought about the future, they wouldn't gamble. And he's constantly asking for money. Typical of gamblers. Typical, right? So there you have described a broker that is ultimately not risk averse, but he loves risk. And he only thinks about himself. He's an egotist, a pure egotist. Hence the fact that he doesn't want to have a child. His wife is only to get his money.
Sì, la stavano rimproverando perché si è allontanato dal microfono, ma quantomeno credo che la domanda sia.
Okay, I wonder about it because I thought as well this guy is a gambler because he was also always asking for money in no way possible. At some point, he's always there. But at the same time, like I decided to avoid to say he's a gambler because I didn't have an explicit reference to that. No, I agree. But the point is, like, when you find description of other merchants in the Datini, you find when they describe the gamblers. For example, there is one of the main factors of Datini that there is like the notary of Datini that is super grumpy at him. He's always saying like, yeah, that idiot is always gambling, or yeah, I hope he dies soon so he stops to gamble, and all stuff like that. So I think there are discussions related to these people being gamblers. Even there is a descriptions of Barattiere, so hardcore gambler in Prato, coming from this letter. So I would say if he would have been a gambler, they would have mentioned that other merchants. Also because like who would have checked those letters? It's not that they were read publicly. And at the same time, I see the point, but I avoided to do that because of the lack of evidences. But it's a good theory. But still, also, I don't agree with you about the fact that they don't think about the future. They think about the future, but with a mentality of a gambler, and that makes them risk. Okay, they love risk, but at the same time they're always crying on themselves. And it's something that you find in other sources. For example, Buonaccorso Pitti, that was describing himself when he was gambling. He was gambling everything out, at some point asking for money, going again for it. But it's another kind of future thinking that is different from one of the merchants, but still, maybe comparing them, you can extract more. There are works about it, but for the later period.
Bene, Angela.
Grazie Niccolò per la tua presentazione molto interessante. La mia riflessione riguarda l'uso della terminologia con cui si esprime l'incertezza. Allora, sì, anch'io nelle letture della documentazione datiniana non ho mai trovato l'utilizzo del termine rischio. Si usa spesso danno. Un aspetto su cui forse converrebbe riflettere è l'uso del termine danno sia per una certezza che per esprimere l'incertezza, cioè, tanto per fare un esempio, i pirati hanno fatto gran danno alla merce perché hanno catturato la nave e quindi in questo caso il termine danno esprime una certezza e non ha a che vedere con il futuro, ma può anche chiaramente essere utilizzata per esprimere un'espressione che fa riferimento, per esprimere un concetto che fa riferimento al futuro. Se la nave sarà catturata, dai pirati sarà gran danno. Quindi questo forse è un aspetto su cui conviene riflettere. La seconda questione è perché tu attribuisci agli effetti della peste il termine rischio che loro non utilizzano, se non ho capito male, no? Agli effetti della peste tu attribuisci la parola rischio, seppure, perlomeno nel testo, dando un'occhiata rapida, seppure, appunto, come abbiamo detto, loro non lo utilizzano mai. E allora, forse, per le letture future, sicuramente farai del carteggio Datini, sarebbe importante tenere in considerazione ciò che viene collegato a questa espressione per i gran pericoli che si corrono, perché questa forse è un'espressione che più si avvicina al concetto di rischio e che loro utilizzano, perlomeno per quello che ho visto io, sia per questioni legate agli aspetti prettamente economici, ma anche per questioni legate alla vita quotidiana.
Posso rispondere in inglese o vado di italiano? Vabbè, vado di italiano. Allora, sono d'accordo. C'è una specifica terminologia per questa tipologia di disastri, ma ho considerato anche quella. Nel senso, danno certezza e incertezza. Io penso che sia generalmente il riferimento al danno per sé, se è un danno certo o incerto, c'è una differenza, ma io ho guardato più quando si costruiscono aspettative di futuro relative a questi eventi, e in questo caso c'è sempre un riferimento al futuro, perché si dice sono arrivati i pirati, hanno creato questo danno, come lo risolviamo? Quindi fa parte di un'intera struttura della frase che va a creare aspettative di futuro. E sono d'accordo, c'è un danno certo e incerto, ma non è sempre così chiaro dalle lettere, perché loro, ad esempio, quando c'è una guerra dicono più o meno sono morte queste persone, dopo si correggono, dopo dicono no, forse quello, forse quell'altro, quindi è una difficoltà, ma penso lo saprai anche probabilmente meglio di me, stabilire queste cose. E per quanto invece cioè, relativo alla terminologia della peste, nel caso di Talerano non è definito un rischio, nel caso un danno, ma nel caso di tutte le altre corrispondenze che ho visto è definito un danno. Loro lo quantificano dicendo la peste è un piccolo danno, grande danno, o altrimenti usano la terminologia più epidemica, quindi piccola moria, grande moria, la moria ci fa gran danno, quindi c'è sempre un riferimento al danno, e logico può essere esplicito con gran danno, danno, o implicito con piccola moria, grande moria. Però anche la questione dei pericoli è interessante, ho provato a analizzare anche quella da un punto di vista quantitativo e ho realizzato che lo usano veramente molto poco. Cioè usano molto meno nel caso delle mie corrispondenze. E cioè nella corrispondenza veneziana pericolo mi sembra appaia sulle 7 volte. Sulle facciamo 900 lettere, quasi 1000 che ho visto, 7 volte. Dopo faccio una comparazione con danno ed è completamente diverso. E perché ho pensato anche a altre maniere in cui queste persone definiscono il danno, e rischio veramente pochissimo, mi sembra 4 volte in tutte queste lettere, tra cui 2 di queste sono copie. E invece nel caso di pericolo ci sono riferimenti, ad esempio nelle preghiere mercantili che ho citato, però non è così intensamente usato quanto danno, cioè la quantificazione mostra completamente un altro aspetto. Per questo ho deciso di analizzare più danno che pericolo. Almeno qua, nella tesi l'ho guardata.
Posso fare una battuta? Penso che non sia appunto solo un problema della documentazione datiniana, ma il termine rischio non è un termine diffuso. Si trova in altri ambienti che non hanno niente a che vedere. Esiste un tipo di contratto nell'edilizia, correggetemi se sbaglio, che si chiama rischio e sommo. Ci sono, diciamo, altri usi, quindi qui il vocabolario ci potrebbe aiutare. Credo che abbia ragione Angela quando dice che la parola danno è una parola che può essere usata, diciamo, sia per la possibilità che per la realtà, quindi il tema è molto interessante.
Infatti, questa cosa non l'ho vista solo dalle corrispondenze dattiniane, ma anche da cronache, contratti o libri contabili. Si parla di danno, non di rischio.
Bene, allora abbiamo finito queste poche domande per Niccolò e adesso passiamo alle domande per Benedetto, e la prima è di Antonio Iodice.
Sì, grazie per la relazione, è molto interessante. Si evince la presenza di un dataset ricco e che va a implementare i dati e le osservazioni che erano già state fatte da tenenti relative invece alla parte precedente del XVI secolo. Faccio delle domande brevi, poi magari ne possiamo anche discutere più tardi. Hai un'idea del livello di rappresentatività delle polizze che hai studiato, che hai analizzato, rispetto al totale delle polizze che venivano stipulate a Dubrovnik o rispetto al totale delle navi di passaggio, della connettività marittima di cui hai parlato, se è possibile fare una stima anche vaga? E poi volevo chiedere se hai trovato anche assicurazioni sulle navi, perché non ho capito, mi pare che hai menzionato camellotti e cereali, soprattutto mi chiedevo se le avessi anche su corpo e noli, e anche in questo caso se hai informazioni sul valore totale delle navi rispetto a quello che veniva assicurato. Grazie.
Allora, sì, come ho già detto durante la presentazione, ma forse è meglio chiarire questo aspetto, ogni assicurazione veniva registrata, sono seriali, ci sono tutte, quindi sono tutte a parte qualcuna che può essere sfuggita e può essere finita nel notarile, ma ho fatto anche questa verifica. La stragrande maggioranza, ma parliamo di una percentuale al di sopra del 90% annuo, veniva registrato sui noli e securità. Quindi ci sono tutte ed è possibile fare un'analisi quantitativa, sistematica, giorno per giorno di tutto quello che veniva assicurato. Ovviamente mi sono focalizzato su alcune merci, alcuni mercanti e così via, ma potendo e avendone il tempo si può sviluppare, così come sto facendo, perché ho già tutta la documentazione necessaria, si può sviluppare un dataset o database completo di tutte le assicurazioni registrate nei noli, che come ribadisco sono la quasi totalità. Vorrei dire una cosa, anche Tenenti si era posto questo problema e infatti nel suo volume spiega abbastanza bene che poteva scegliere una metodologia più quantitativa, più rigida o una metodologia narrativa. Ha scelto la metodologia narrativa perché quelli erano i mezzi a disposizione in quella fase storica. Oggi disponiamo degli strumenti anche tecnologici, oltre che tutti i tassi e così via di cambio, che ci consentono di avere esattamente un'idea di cosa avviene, ma un'idea abbastanza precisa. E a onor del vero, come già ho detto, si dimentica spesso Bratislava Tenenti, che era di Dubrovnik, era una storica di Dubrovnik, è stata lei ad avere un grande ruolo nell'avvicinare Alberto Tenenti a quella documentazione e gliene va dato merito, e effettivamente lei ha studiato in un brevissimo articolo poco noto un po' della fase successiva, quindi qualche dato lo si ritrova da questo piccolissimo articolo che lei ha scritto e che nessuno ricorda perché è un aspetto che riguarda le assicurazioni e spesso nella storiografia occidentale diamo più valore ai libri che agli articoli. Devo dire, spesso accade anche che si dia più valore agli storici uomini che donne, questo è un altro particolare, però ci fu quell'articolo e va citato, è giusto che venga menzionato, piccolo, breve, ma dà un'idea nel periodo leggermente successivo. Ultima cosa era quella su se vengono assicurate le navi. Sì, vengono assicurate le navi, viene assicurato anche dell'invio di denaro, vengono assicurati anche gioielli, vengono assicurate anche le persone, compresa la persona del rettore stesso qualora dovesse muoversi in nave. Quindi è estremamente interessante. Quello che non si trova è l'assicurazione di metalli preziosi, al di fuori di gioie, ovvero di gioielli lavorati, di metalli preziosi, perché c'è un problema di importazione dai Balcani che è abbastanza noto, perché l'impero ottomano creava questo divieto, quindi è difficile trovare metalli preziosi in grande quantità. mentre non si trova un'altra cosa che si può trovare altrove, e purtroppo questo è cioè, per fortuna a merito della Repubblica di Ragusa, non c'è traffico di schiavi. Mentre altrove è possibile, la Repubblica di Ragusa proibisce il traffico di schiavi, è una delle prime repubbliche a farlo, e pertanto è quasi impossibile trovare degli schiavi citati o assicurati che passano attraverso il sistema raguseo, perché è assolutamente proibito. Può capitare che ci siano dei servi, degli schiavi all'interno del sistema raguseo, ma è molto raro e sono casi particolari. In generale la schiavitù è proibita e questo di questo va dato merito alla Repubblica di Ragusa. E altra cosa, ovviamente non c'è nemmeno prestito ad interesse, tranne che in rari casi, perché anche il prestito ad interesse di chiunque è proibito dalla Repubblica e da questo punto di vista si sviluppa sia il credito commerciale, che invece è avvantaggiato, quindi anche una configurazione di economia diversa, e d'altro canto abbiamo la possibilità degli ebrei di partecipare al sistema di assicurativo, che forse, probabilmente nelle fonti veneziane non è così esplicito, non è così presente, così come anche di molti altri forestieri che sistematicamente vengono esclusi da questo tipo di lucro nei sistemi, penso al sistema veneziano ad esempio. Però devo dire che conosco molto meglio quello raguseo che quello veneziano, ovviamente. Sì, quindi vengono assicurate le navi e ovviamente sì, ci sono poi anche le polizze di affondamento delle navi e quindi tutte le pratiche di rimborso e così via, certo.
Allora, Sari.
Very much. It's me again. I have several questions. Thank you very much for your. I will make my question in English, but like the answer could be in Italian. I don't have any problem in understanding. The first question that I have after reading the paper and from the presentation, you used the term economia della connettività marittima to describe the Ragusa's commercial logic. Could you please clarify how this concept could possibly differ from existing frameworks when we say about the brokerage networks or Mediterranean world economy? Like, the question is, in your opinion, what does connectivity explain that, for example, network does not explain in this case? Because like I had this question. The second one, it's concerning the Sephardic merchants and Ragusan economy, particularly when we're speaking about the second half of the 16th century. So how do you assess the balance between the agency and structural opportunities? In this case, the question is, this is the success of a product of pragmatic neutrality of Ragusa, or in this case, we're speaking about their own trans-Mediterranean family network? Like, as a Jewish, I cannot omit this question. And another question is I had that you said that insurance rate approximately from 8% to 100%. And you spoke about that, and typically undervaluation of goods and Ragusan policies. In the paper, you does not explain how this valuation were calculated. The question is, given the absence of actuarial science at the time, we don't have them, so what were the actual mechanism of risk assessment? How exactly in Ragusa they did it? So, were they based on empirical data, reputation, purely negotiation between the merchants? So how they did that? Thank you very
much. I will try to answer you in Globish. So, the first thing I think is the economia della connettività. I think that quoted in a perspective of early modern era, a famous book of Parag Khanna about connectography in contemporary era, in modern era. Okay, of course. I tried to connect it to the early modern, and I think it's run. So, economia della connettività regards the structure of the harbor connections and harbor connectivity in Adriatic and Mediterranean, the first one, and the human capital, of course. Those two things, the both connected to each other, determine an economy of connection. An economy of connection that run, and it is the second question, to the is strictly connected to the first proto-supply chain mechanism in Mediterranean and the Balkans. And yes, of course, it's moved from the individual and the family networks is the first step to a more organized and rationalized system of economy, not only based on ethnic ties, and in the sources is evident that there is no ethnic tie so relevant than the normal interconnection of alterity in economical activities. And the last one was, there is any question? Any other? Okay. Usually we have the data of the value of merchandise and the merchandise insured. That's it. That's the basis. In other cases, there is the possibility to establish what is the value of the merchandise. And about the traders, the merchants, yes, there is an aspect of reputation. Of course, it is normal in early modern period. And at the same time, there is a system of procurators, a very developed system of procurators in all Mediterranean, and we can find some of these tracks in insurance activities. And the last one is, of course, the material presence of merchandise, and the merchandise is the best insurance. So there is also another aspect. Usually the merchandise don't arrive in time, and the clausula of the insurance determine an increasing of percentage of insuration. It may be interesting to determine how much of this merchandise don't arrive in time and how much is the percentage of insurance and to the merchants, to the insurance. That's it. Sorry. I hope to be clear in my really bad English. Thank you.
Bene, Maria Dolores.
Bene, prima di tutto grazie mille per il suo magnifico intervento. Io ho 3 questioni, mi scuso perché non so se il mio italiano si capisce molto bene, no? La prima questione è sulle donne mercanti. Queste donne mercantesse che lei ha parlato, non so se ho capito bene, ma penso che lei ha detto che queste donne fanno investimenti come assicuratori, assicurano le mercanzie, no? E allora la mia domanda è, queste donne si possono filiare voglio dire, sono vedove, sono sposate, si sono vedove, sono donne che continuano il negozio del marito e che hanno già un apprendimento previo, perché lavorano nella invisibilità, ma lavorano con il marito e conoscono, ha una conoscenza perfetta del mondo mercantile, no? E dopo quando restano vedova, allora continuano, no, questi negozi. O sono donne sposate che lavorano con il suo proprio denaro e il marito fa i suoi investimenti e la donna fa il suo investimento. No? Non so se con le fonti che lei ha lavorato si può sapere queste filiazioni o no. E anche sulle donne, chi è questa Clara d'Aragona? Si sa, ha informazioni su questa donna che per il nome evidentemente si sa da dove viene, no? Questa è la prima domanda. La seconda è sulla lana. Sì, ho capito bene, ha parlato della lana come una delle materie prime che si assicurano perché arrivano, no? Arrivano a Ragusa. Questa lana arriva? O parte? Arriva?
Arriva, viene assicurata poi per le spedizioni.
Allora, qual è l'origine di questa lana?
Certo.
E la terza domanda o questione è sul sistema consolare. Il sistema consolare, io penso che, se ho capito anche bene, ha parlato del sistema consolare raguseo nell'estero, no? I consolati nelle aree del Mediterraneo, no? Ma la mia domanda è sul sistema consolare degli stranieri a Ragusa. Ha potuto vedere nelle fonti se c'è un sistema consolare? Il mio interesse è su, evidentemente, il consul catalano. Noi sappiamo che ha un consul importantissimo, ma fino alla fine del 400. E la nostra domanda, perché non si è fatto una ricerca dopo, è se questo consolato continua dopo. Il consolato catalano, se lo possiamo trovarlo al 500 o al 600, non lo so, e per questo se lei lo ha visto nelle fonti. Grazie.
Allora, andiamo per ordine. Alla prima domanda, quella sulle donne, in parte ha già risposto. In gran parte, una parte consistente sono vedove, non tutte. Pertanto sono vedove di mercanti o nipoti o in qualche modo sorelle di mercanti. Quindi sono strettamente interconnesse al mondo mercantile, conoscono il mondo mercantile e lo sanno far funzionare. Il loro ruolo è significativo per la storia sociale, benché quantitativamente ovviamente nelle transazioni annue è un ruolo alquanto ridotto rispetto a quello usualmente degli uomini, ma è significativo per la storia sociale e talvolta è significativo se si riduce alla verifica di una spedizione. Allora assumono un ruolo determinante. Quando investono in maniera cospicua, quindi lo fanno in maniera sistematica. Ovviamente sono meno rispetto agli uomini, ma investono cifre considerevoli. E quello che posso anche aggiungere che talvolta si tratta di mogli. In tal caso l'investimento cambia. L'assicurazione in tal caso è su gioielli o è su qualcosa o è su alcune merci che si spediscono verso propri procuratori all'estero. Quindi sì, hanno anche un'attività economica parallela. Si può abbastanza si può affermare che le donne abbiano una propria attività economica, non strettamente dipendente da quella degli uomini, sia come vedove sia come donne sposate. Questo è particolarmente vero anche nel caso di donne ebree come quella Clara d'Aragona. Di Clara d'Aragona, probabilmente dal mio database, adesso lo potrei controllare seduta stante, ma sicuramente sappiamo qual è la dote, sappiamo chi è il marito, sappiamo chi sono i figli, possiamo ricostruirne l'albero genealogico, ma così per tutte le famiglie che passano da Dubrovnik, insomma, chiunque passa dalla città e ci rimane viene registrato, questo già in età moderna, e forse riusciamo a capire anche dove abitava, perché all'interno del ghetto si sapeva chi prendeva in affitto cosa, e i rinnovi erano ogni 5 anni, quindi sistematicamente veniva registrato qualsiasi cosa. Erano case dello Stato, come erano case dello Stato anche le abitazioni del resto della città dentro le mura. Quindi sì, le risorse archivistiche di Ragusa possono anche essere utilizzate per questi aspetti di storia sociale, di storia di genere, connesse alla storia economica, perché è un aspetto che giustamente va valorizzato. La seconda parte sulla lana. La lana viene importata prevalentemente dai Balcani, prevalentemente dai territori di dominazione ottomana dei Balcani, e confluisce verso Ragusa. Non solo, viene importata anche lana dalla Puglia, sicuramente, e probabilmente ci sono delle connessioni, sicuramente a memoria ci sono delle connessioni anche con la Spagna. Dopodiché spesso si è affermato che Ragusa esportava materia grezza, no? Ragusa rilavorava queste materie e poi le esportava, altrimenti sarebbe un business che non avrebbe senso, sarebbe semplicemente un sistema di connessione. No, c'era anche un sistema di manifattura. E questo sistema di manifattura si è evoluto nel corso del tempo, e dunque lo esportavano verso Venezia, verso Ancona, verso i porti, anche verso porti atlantici. Non solo lana semplice, venivano esportati appunto tavole di cammellotti, che da quanto ne so era uno dei prodotti più costosi, anche in considerazione del fatto che le tavole di cammellotti erano estremamente grandi, quindi bisogna considerare anche il fatto che quando venivano esportate 10-20 tavole di cammellotti si riempiva uno spazio consistente, ma effettivamente erano dei prodotti estremamente costosi dal punto di vista dell'assicurazione, emerge dalle cifre assicurative. Il sistema consolare è stato studiato più volte nel periodo jugoslavo e anche precedentemente. Nel periodo jugoslavo ha raggiunto la sua massima espansione, penso agli studi di Mitic, e per quanto riguarda l'impero ottomano anche ai più recenti studi di Miovic. Dunque abbiamo un'idea di tutta la rete consolare di Ragusa verso l'estero, e dalla documentazione anche si possono ricavare le informazioni di connessione di Ragusa verso l'estero. Ad esempio la corrispondenza di andata e ritorno verso lo Stato Pontificio è estremamente dettagliata, estremamente utile. Addirittura si potrebbero incrociare con i dati del Vaticano e vedere cosa ne emerge. Per quanto riguarda la Spagna abbiamo sicuramente i dati relativi al consolato spagnolo, al consolato raguseo nei vari territori spagnoli, quindi anche in quello catalano. Quanto al console di Catalogna a Ragusa, devo essere onesto culturalmente. Io so di studi, ad esempio, di Krekic, di Davi e di Tadic su questi aspetti, sulla presenza di consoli aragonesi nel territorio della Repubblica di Ragusa e la loro connessione anche con la Puglia, perché c'era tutto questo sistema di interconnessione col Regno di Napoli attraverso i catalani. Allo stesso tempo non sono andato a verificare se c'era una presenza di consoli catalani nel 500. Non mi sono posto questo problema, lo farò successivamente. Ringrazio.
Grazie. Gelina.
Now, thank you very much for your work. I appreciate very much databases. I know the painstaking and time-consuming and work that it's needed as everything else, but this is the systematic work gives us really an overview and also the tools for an overview and also to go down in detail, right? So now I have a problem, a general problem, about the compartmentalization of research. So when you do Ragusa, you do Ragusa. The ones that do Venice, they do Venice. Even the Greeks that do Venice, they do only Venetian Greeks. And also the ones that do Ottoman, which is very rarely used or combined, they do Ottoman merchants, right? And then what kind of Ottoman merchants? My experience in trying to trace trade and shipping of Ottoman Greeks and Venetian Greeks from 1700 to 1800 revealed to me the importance and the beauty of combined and collaborative research. So we combined evidence of Ottoman archives from navigational permits to Sanità from and also other archives from Venice, Messina, Napoli, Trieste, Napoli, Livorno, Genova, Marseille, and Barcelona. And we gathered 10,000 voyages, and that gave us all these beautiful sort of ship owners, cargoes, and so on. So this is one comment. My advice here is maybe to organize with the younger generation, since we have the technological means, a combined research to make databases of that, and not only of the South, but also of the North. And my question here is, what kind of archives, what types of archives you use? Assicurazioni, yes, but what other archives from Ragusa archive, or was it just Ragusa archive in Dubrovnik? So just want to know about that. Now, the second thing is that I liked very much the fact that you combined maritime and land trade, because usually we do one or the other, all right? Now, the Balkan, what we call now Balkan trade, it had also land ports, okay, nodes, and also transport routes, which are very important. And I liked use the tool of connectivity. I would call it as well formation of port systems. And there were port systems with hinterland and foreland, on a local micro-region, on a peripheral, and a more international way, right? So that is also a tool that you can use. Here I wanted to know about the hinterland of your cargoes, okay, of the Ragusan cargoes. And also a small, maybe this is anachronistic, I know about the Abba, textile that is used for the horses and so on, which is from Philippopolis, from Plovdiv in today's Bulgaria, and that's probably very similar to the camelotti. So this is another small. So where is the hinterland? And the third and last question is that yes, maybe historians do not collaborate as much as we should, but did these merchants collaborate? I mean, Ragusa is in a frontier zone between the Ottoman Empire, between the East and the West. And again, I go back to what Ottoman is because I know there were many Greek merchants, Armenian merchants, of course, Serbs and other merchants and Muslim merchants. So if you can, if you have found any kind of collaborations, because this is another thing we're not very good at, right? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will try to synthesize all the questions in one answer. So, first of all, I'm pretty sure that connection of the emerged from the Ragusan sources evidences that there are an inter-ethnic connection with Greeks, of course, with Serbs, with Bosnians, from Sarajevo, of course, and with Croatian ones. It's evident that all these people are involved in trading in Dubrovnik, and sometimes there are also captain of navy or armors from Greek, for example, from Greece, or are Greeks. Other are Serbs, Armenians. It's evident from the sources, and yes, many Sephardic not in the role of armors, but in the role of traders. There are also, of course, traders of Armenians and Greeks and etc. and Slavic. Which other inspiration? From Ancona, there are many sources, archival sources from Ancona about insuration of merchandise, and then the nature of the archival sources of Ancona is not so simply than Ragusa, because in Ragusa you have all the insurance, okay, all organized together. In Ancona you have insurances in notarial documents, communal archives, documents, etc. There is a different system of recording of the insurances. Maybe really interesting to develop a comparative system and crossed system with Venice and Trieste, and sometime with Naples, because in the Great Archive of Naples there are documents about the harbor of Puglia, and they were connected with the Ragusian one, but it is not so systematic. We need to cooperate, the scientific research needs to be cooperative, of course. At the same time, we need to standardize the data to cross the information and understand what happened exactly in a period, in a time frame, to understand how the trading economy develop in a year, in a decade, etc. Thank you.
Bene, allora l'ultima domanda, no proprio perché poi ce n'è una a metà, ma insomma l'ultima domanda specifica per Benedetto, penso che sia la tua perché questa anonima, sì, prego.
Buongiorno a tutti, grazie ai relatori per le presentazioni molto interessanti. Nell'introdurre l'argomento hai citato Di Vittorio, Antonio Di Vittorio, che in effetti è stato forse tra gli italiani quello che ha più dedicato energie, no, a Ragusa sotto vari aspetti. Tuttavia non è il suo principale tema, quello di Ragusa, perché lui è partito dai lavori sul Regno di Napoli, degli austriaci, quindi Poi ha affidato Ragusa anche ai suoi allievi, quindi in primis la professoressa Pierucci, e più recentemente si sta dedicando insomma anche a quest'area Dario Dell'Osa. C'è un lavoro nel 2024 pubblicato su Business History sul commercio del grano raguseo, e che probabilmente può esserti utile anche per incrociare alcune informazioni. Collegandomi a quello che ha anche anticipato Antonio Iodice, perché in effetti sono anch'io incuriosito un po' da queste fonti che non conosco, però sono registri di sicurezza, no? Ma sono fonti consolari essenzialmente. Perché se sono fonti consolari o sono gestiti dal consolato, è possibile anche che non siano rappresentative di tutte le registrazioni, di tutte le polizze insomma, che sono state in un certo senso sottoscritte. E poi questa è appunto la prima domanda. La seconda domanda riguarda la distribuzione che ci hai un po' rappresentato, soprattutto con quel grafico con le connessioni, perché l'impressione che ho avuto è che il grosso del traffico si sviluppasse soprattutto col basso Adriatico, tra Ragusa e il basso Adriatico, almeno guardando un po' il numero, no, delle rotte che ci hai indicato. Venezia in questo, la Repubblica, quanto pesa in questa distribuzione? Cioè in termini di numero, per esempio, di viaggi, e soprattutto di valore assicurato, perché questa è un po' la curiosità che avevo. Grazie.
Grazie per il suggerimento. Anche per l'indicazione dell'articolo di Dellosa che andrò a consultare per quanto riguarda il grano, ma di solito io mi occupo della economia privata e il grano era di preeminenza pubblica perché era considerato una risorsa di sicurezza dello Stato, quindi interveniva il pubblico su quell'aspetto e veniva comunque assicurato, quindi sì, però lo andrò a leggere. E ovviamente, grazie per aver citato Di Vittorio, sì, ne conosco e ne stimo la scuola, questo senza dubbio. È una scuola molto importante, tra l'altro. Una distinzione che forse non è stata abbastanza chiara nella mia esposizione. I documenti di Noli non sono documenti consolari. Ho parlato di due tipi di fonti diverse in questa relazione. Nella prima parte ho parlato dei Noli, ovvero delle assicurazioni sui prodotti marittimi. Sistematicamente sono registrati, come già dicevo, sistematicamente ogni giorno, o quasi ogni giorno, quindi sono abbastanza rappresentative, come dicevo. Non sono consolari, sono di una forma di notariato pubblico, ovvero non abbiamo tanti notai separati, abbiamo il notaio pubblico che registrava tutti i noli da un punto di vista documentale e sono tutti conservati insieme, quindi è fantastico lavorarci. Sì. Ci sono poi gli aspetti relativi ai consolati. Altra fonte, anzi altri due enormi fondi archivistici che sono le lettere di Levante e le lettere di Ponente, che sono i consolati orientali e i consolati occidentali, perché Ragusa ragionava in questi termini, ciò che arriva da Occidente e ciò che arriva da Oriente, e li organizzava così. Quindi abbiamo addirittura la possibilità di avere una panoramica, qualora qualcuno, ma per una sola persona è quasi impossibile consultare tutte le fonti consolari della Repubblica di Ragusa, sono veramente tante, però si può avere la prospettiva di tutte le corrispondenze, ecco perché servono team di lavoro su questo, tutte le corrispondenze sul Mediterraneo attraverso Ragusa con le fonti consolari. Le assicurazioni sono un'altra fonte e sono tutte separate e distinte. È molto semplice avere una panoramica immediata e diretta di cosa viene assicurato e quando, ed è sì rappresentativo. Sul peso della rappresentazione. Io vi ho dato un grafico che è il grafico della presenza, una mappatura della presenza dei consolati adriatici, che è un aspetto senz'altro importante perché sui consolati si riversa poi l'interesse commerciale, ma non significa affatto che Ragusa non avesse interesse verso Venezia, perché Venezia è un polo commerciale di alta rilevanza. E infatti dalla documentazione emerge una forte connessione commerciale con Venezia, cioè coesiste una problematicità storiografica a sé stante sulla quale Bariša Krekić si è soffermato in Unequal Rivals per l'aspetto medievale, ma che si proietta anche sull'aspetto moderno, ovvero Venezia da un lato è la rivale di Ragusa ed è un problema per Ragusa e viceversa, così come anche Brodel evidenzia, dall'altro, questo emerge dalla documentazione, è un polo commerciale strettamente interconnesso perché i poli adriatici sono tutti interconnessi tra loro, quindi ha un ruolo determinante anche nell'economia di Ragusa e viceversa. Perché sono due repubbliche che commerciano e spesso in condizioni di conflitto questa condizione tende ad essere ancora più importante, perché nel momento in cui Venezia è impegnata in guerra è ovvio che il ruolo di mediazione economica, di valvola di mediazione economica attraverso la neutralità di Ragusa è determinante perché il sistema adriatico, che è un sistema commerciale, regga comunque. E questo è un aspetto che spesso si considera poco. Sarebbe interessante andare a vedere proprio nei periodi di guerra, come ho evidenziato anche nei periodi di crisi, andare a vedere proprio nei periodi di guerra cosa avviene attraverso Ragusa, perché la sua neutralità è determinante.
Bene, allora
Grazie a lei.
Luis con una domanda, l'ultima domanda per Benedetto e poi la prima per Ieronia.
Well, thank you for your wonderful presentation that obviously derives from your work, but I guess also from this wonderful source. My question would be around beeswax, which might seem a secondary commodity, but I think really isn't, given that such a presence of beeswax, of Ragusian beeswax, arriving even to the west of the Mediterranean. So around this product, I would ask many questions. But probably my main question would be is if you through the insurances are able to see if there was any control of Ragusian merchants over the production on site, which I think was farther east towards Bulgaria and so on. So I guess this wax, as you showed, arrived to Ragusa, and I was wondering if you could tell us something about the specificities of risk management and risk assessment on this specific product, given its value, the long trip it had in Rayward, and also obviously the destinies it was going through. It was going to. So yeah, that would be the question about wax and where did it come from, if there was control of beeswax production from Ragusa, and which was a bit the management of risk with this specific product. Thank you.
Ok. Per quanto riguarda la cera, che è un aspetto interessante, la provenienza è prevalentemente balcanico meridionale. Mi sono chiesto più volte il perché dai Balcani meridionali, probabilmente perché c'è un'apicoltura più sviluppata, cioè tradizionalmente sviluppata questa tradizione, quindi di solito vengono dall'area bulgara, macedone e così via, entroterra o o comunque Balcani meridionali. Questo sicuramente. Viene importata questa cera sistematicamente questa merce, che risulta essere inizialmente abbastanza rara nella documentazione, comincia a diventare più cospicua. Quindi suppongo che anche la richiesta fosse tale, e viene inviata prevalentemente, da quanto ho notato, verso Ancona, quindi suppongo verso lo Stato della Chiesa, che risulta essere un'importatrice di questa cera. Così come, d'altro canto, viene esportata carta. Di solito i due elementi sono strettamente interconnessi. Arriva carta da Ancona, quindi suppongo da Fabriano e così via, da quell'area, verso Ragusa. Non sono sicuro che lavorino la cera a Ragusa. È un elemento che devo andare a verificare. So di certo che arriva dai Balcani cera e che poi la esportano. Non ho verificato se effettivamente viene poi lavorata in qualche maniera. Viene definita usualmente cera nella maggior parte dei documenti, talvolta candele in altri casi. Quindi si può in maniera molto, molto approssimativa, devo dire, da questo punto di vista, definire cosa è cera e cosa è candela, ma è per onestà quella che potremmo definire una supposizione, perché effettivamente non possiamo avere la certezza che quando si dice cera non sono candele e viceversa. E da questo punto di vista occorre anche un certo rigore nell'affermare che il documento ci parla e ci dice cose fino a un certo punto, dopodiché affermare forse è già un eccesso di approssimazione, quindi bisogna stare alla fonte ed essere fedeli alla fonte. Io ritengo che questo sia fondamentale nel mestiere dello storico. Ringrazio.
Mi ripermetto un'altra battuta sulla cera. Nella seconda metà del Trecento, sicuramente chi ha lavorato sul carteggio datiniano e altri carteggi, seconda metà 300 e 400, con l'esplosione delle epidemie, diciamo il commercio della cera cresce notevolmente, e ci sono anche commenti di mercanti che insomma sono addirittura un po' come quei terribili imprenditori che erano contenti del terremoto dell'Aquila perché così ricostruivano. C'è qualcuno che dice qui se la moria finisce con la cera non facciamo più niente. Poi ovviamente la cera serviva per tutti gli usi religiosi e per quelli dell'illuminazione. Non so se è una specificità fiorentina, a Firenze si facevano anche oggetti in cera a scopo votivo molto famosi, perché insomma uno si rompeva una gamba, si faceva una bella gamba di cera e si portava alla Santissima Annunziata. Ma vabbè, questo è per, come dire, alleggerire la serie delle domande. Luis, devi fare una domanda anche per Ieroni. Grazie.
I was wondering about the assets of these shwetas, of these conversos, well, not exactly conversos, but of Jewish lineage, and specifically about land and houses. You mentioned that these were sequestered by the Inquisition, and I was wondering how much or how many of these land plots were inside the city and which were outside the city in the rural areas of Mallorca. And in this second case, have you traced any, not only plots of lands, but the whole alquerías, masos, in the hands of these shwetas? Thank you.
First, I apologize for if I don't understand very well the questions. Of all the nuance is difficult in another language. Rispetto alla question, Luis, the majority of the real estate confiscated to the Jesuits is in Neighborg, in the city. You don't know, Mallorca until today is a city, the capital now Palma, and then is the village Parforana. No? The majority of the real estate is in Neighborg, is in between Santa Eulalia Parish and San Nicolas Parish. Is known for El Sajell. It's very concentrated. It's not the same, the medieval Kyle or ghetto, no? It's a new neighborhood, but I think it's not very sure, but I think it's created in 15th century, in the end, and during the 16th century. And the Chuedes had homes and botigas overall. No rural properties. It's very interesting because when grew up the healthy or during the 16th century, in the end, 2 years or 3 before the persecution, a big rich Chuet buy Rafales. But it's only 3 or 3 years before. It's very interesting when change and start to buy rural properties. It's when the persecution is initiated. Thank you.
Bene, allora Jacopo.
Okay, thank you for a presentation about something that I was completely unaware of, so I learned a lot. I have a pretty simple question, and that is, you mentioned that 73% of the value of the assets taken were in public annuities. And I was just wondering whether this is an accurate representation of the portfolios of these people, or whether they had any opportunities to try to prevent real estate taken from them and rather dump annuities and allow the Inquisition to take the annuities rather than the land.
I'm not very sure I understand, but 73% or more or less of the all goods, all property confiscated is in financial investment. It includes 50% of the annuities, the different public debt, overall the debt of the university is the city, the institution, the council of the city, and other institutions is above all, I'm sorry, girls, and thank you, Joyce, and guilds and the village of the council town, the village. And it's because it's the most important business in this group is the learn of the, but it's very interesting now with our project is understand through this documentation, understand how is or where is the origin of the money, no, this group, because before in 16th century is not important, and when start the 16th century, this start to make a small business around the commerce of the export and import and small commerce, and then when have profits, invest in learn in the public debt. In this moment, the percentage is very important. The problem is that in Mallorca, don't study the public debt. There isn't important research about that. And for us, it's difficult to understand which percentage is respect all public debt. But I thought it's very, very important because it's the most important. The church is important, but increase this role. I don't know if thank you.
Sergio Sardone.
Per Geronia, sì. Recentemente ho assistito a un convegno sull'Inquisizione in Portogallo, si è tenuto a Siviglia, organizzato dal Dipartimento di Storia Moderna. Sono emerse due aspetti molto interessanti di questa istituzione. Innanzitutto l'azione, la pressione che esercita su l'Inquisizione. Tu hai lavorato, credo, esclusivamente i conversos, no? Ma l'azione che sviluppa l'Inquisizione è un'azione importante che coincide in particolari momenti di crisi fiscale della corona, cioè è maggiore la pressione che esercita sulle comunità, che non sono necessariamente un judeo-conversos, no? E questo è un aspetto. Volevo sapere se effettivamente dall'esperienza, dagli studi che stai sviluppando c'è questa sensazione. Tra l'altro hai considerato un periodo che è un periodo abbastanza complicato, no? del regno di Carlo II, perché siamo quasi in prossimità di una riforma monetaria che fu appunto approntata in quegli anni. Il secondo aspetto è che effettivamente il contenzioso che origina l'Inquisizione non produce poi in effetti un equivalente volume in termini di introiti e di liquidazione dei patrimoni confiscati, nel senso che si paventa, si minaccia, ma a seguito poi anche di questi contenziosi, poi solo una parte, adesso a seconda degli anni questa parte poteva essere diversa, almeno i relatori parlavano di un 15, 20, 30%, che poi effettivamente veniva incamerata dagli ufficiali dell'Inquisizione. Volevo sapere se nel caso che tu stai analizzando sulle Baleari effettivamente hai questa sensazione, no? questo riscontro.
Grazie. Beh, respect the first question, is very know that the monarchy have problem, but in this case, I think we think the monarchy not take the initiative for the persecution of this community. No, it's the own tribunal, Mallorcan tribunal. There is a literature about the problems of the tribunals, the Inquisition tribunals in Spain. There is a lot of good books about that. But in this case, the Mallorcan tribunal have a lot of problems for a long time, having income and need increase. In general, in Spain, there is a tendency to try to obtain more income, about stable income for census or annuities. No? And in case the initiative is the Mallorcan Tribunal. It's a new inquisitor few years before and start this. And respect to the percentage of the monarchy of this income, I think is very, the most important is Henry Kamen in 1968 write an article in the Economic History Review say this case, the Mallorcan Tribunal in this auto de fe, is the most important quantity confiscate for the Inquisition, Spanish Inquisition, at once, in a time. And it's difficult know, it's most important to understand too, in Spanish Inquisition, when initiated a persecution a person, confiscate all goods, no? all property. And then, if guilty or no, is no problem, no? Then, ya se verá, no? Well, in this case, the amount we calculate is more or less 1,000,000. Apart, it have problems because there is creditors, there is family who ask for this property, but in this case, it's very sure at least 10% is for the monarchy. At least, because now our work is in process, no? But it's sure at least 10% is for the monarchy, or the different things, no? Thank you.
Preston.
Madame, Signora House, je peux parler en français? Vous comprenez français?
Non.
Non, mais c'est plus facile. Oui, essayez, parce que...
Italiano or
Como
English?
No.
In English?
I can ask in English, but
In English, please.
So I'm intrigued with your...
Microphone.
Hello, again. I am thank you very much. I'm intrigued by your work. I must say that I read Henry Kamen many years ago when I was very little. Not that I'm big now, but in any case, I have two questions, things that came to mind here. The general question and the specific question. The general question concerns then the fact that if you confiscate the debt. And from what I gather, the debt which you're speaking of is municipal and royal debt. But you said the università, which is the municipal debt, the local debt. Is that right? Yes. So in that case, by seizing the assets of the converso, they are erasing their debt. Because the converso, they must have maintained, as you suggest, and you can confirm or refute or correct me, but the converso obtained a predominant amount of the local debt, of the municipal debt. They owned a large part of the debt. So removing that debt, you remove, on affaisse la dette, on dirait. Huh? And secondly, the question that comes to mind is the private debt, because you said that they owned the bottega, the boutiques. Hence, they must have had also debts on individuals in the town. And so what happened to the debt that they had on the individuals in the town? Was that simply erased? So that meant that there was two reasons to crush these people, get these people. They had too much on the locals. Now, that ties into the second point. Because I assume, but I may be completely wrong, je ne sais pas, hein, peut-être c'est pas une quantité importante de dette de la couronne espagnole. Je pense que ce n'est pas très important, la dette détenue à Majorque. Je ne sais pas. Vous êtes l'expert sur la dette espagnole.
You should speak English because
okay, excuse me. Yes, I know, I'm switching. But I was hoping that to be more okay. So, there are then also the question of the local interests, and then you have this interesting point. Francesca Tuiola received 66,000 livres. Who is Francesca Tuiola? And the viceroy, they give him 50,000 as well. So I mean, I assume again that they grease his palms, right? You shut up, you let us do what we want, we pay you off 50,000. But who is this Tuiola? That's my second. There's obviously something going on, right? There's all sorts of things going on here. People are... Yeah, there's many things going on, and I think it would be interesting to explain. And the third final question that comes to mind, because again, I'd like to know more. You say that the Huerte managed to keep their houses. Et moi, je sais pas, je ne le so, I don't know capisco. Because how do they keep their houses there? What was the reason? That wasn't clear. And those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I try to answer your question. I try to explain. It's difficult for me and you for... Yeah, well, this annuity, the Inquisition confiscated this annuity. And the different creditors must pay, to the tribunal for a long time, for years and years. That is change the property, but not change the debt, It's continuing, because the reason for the Inquisition is have income in the future. That is most important. Apart of this annuity sent buy in the market, because need pay to the monarchy, because the monarchy need say a part of this income is for me, and the name say you the viceroy said the name of the viceroy and the widow of the viceroy is person staff of the monarchy pay in advance because the monarchy need urgent the money for the fortification. There is a war in this moment in the monarchy. I think in France, to France, yes, and need money and exige. Ask at the Inquisition a part of the income, yeah, and the tribunal need to buy a part of the annuities for pay this representative of the monarchy, no? But then all other parts of the annuity is for the future in the accountability of the tribunal for pay expenses or have in the future. This is, I think, more or less the explanation of this situation. No? So? Yes, I think it's another representative military of the monarchy. All is the same, or the viceroy, or the captain of the roi, no, the king, no? Well, is the representative. But the most important is this big income is for the future. It's change only the property, but the debtors pay the same. And it's incredible in the documentation, each annuity is annotated, right in the book, the origin and different parts until arrive to the Chueda. No? Because it can control, because need the documentation for ask the payment of the annuities. It's very, very a lot documentation. Each annuity, each home, it's all properties. Thank you.
Katia.
Hola, Geronia. Gracias por tu trabajo. So, I have a few observations that result in a few questions. And my inference comes from my work with Filipe Ribeiro da Silva over the Portuguese Inquisition. I know a different set of tribunals, but I am not sure a different nexus. So there are a few things that I still don't understand in inquisitorial studies. So when you look at the processes of the Inquisition, the trial records, you see a bunch of people being arrested. We suppose always that the new Christians are the targets. However, when you look at the Tribunal of Lisbon, actually the majority of the people that are arrested and for whom assets are confiscated are actually old Christians, not new Christians. And then there's the perception, point number 2, that everything that is confiscated is because either A, communities nail each other down because of that, so there's a, you blame your neighbors and you try to get away without paying your dues. So when you look at livros do promotor, dos cadernos do promotor, so the denunciation books, that's what you see. Also new Christians denouncing other new Christians. It's free for all. And at the same time, when you look at a different part of the archive, that of the finances of the Inquisition itself, what do we find out? That the Inquisition is in debt for 350 years. Okay, in the Portuguese case, the kings get annoyed to their bones because they are the ones subsidizing the Inquisition. They're lending money to the Inquisition permanently. Which, of course, raises the question, are the inquisitors stupid? I mean, what is going on in this institution that we all think can work at their own whims when we know that the Inquisition has regimentos? This is not a random institution. There's laws and procedures that they need to follow. And in the Portuguese case, I can't speak about Majorca, they do follow procedure. They're very, very procedural. Actually, they work better than any other court in the monarchy. So, now my questions. So you have the confisco in Majorca over the new Christians. And you see, of course, more movable assets than immovable assets. That makes sense for the new Christians. That fits the pattern. If you need to get away quickly, better have annuities than a house. You can't take the house on your back. So when you compare what is being confiscated and the way it's being confiscated with the old Christians in the same period of time, you will not perhaps have as much. But is the pattern the same? What Philip and I concluded, yes, the pattern is the same. Then can we read that the Inquisition is actually targeting this group? Or is it just that this group, as a whole, gets denounced more often in periods of crisis, not by the monarchy itself, but by the neighbors? So that's, I guess, the first question. The second question is that you claim, and I think you're right, that in the regimentos, in the orders, in custom of these confiscos, 10% would go to the king. My question is, did it actually go to the king? When you look at the balances of the Inquisition, because they are so good at keeping record, these 10% will enter the balance, but did this 10% ever left the balance to the monarchy or to pay for the king's expenses in Majorca? Honestly, I doubt that, unless the Majorca Inquisition is the only Inquisition in the whole of the Iberian world that is actually carrying a super effort, right? So that they can have at least a zero-sum game. And now my last question, because I think this matters. The administration of the property. What we have noticed for the Lisbon case is that the Inquisition does not have enough people in their employment that can actually administer these assets. Not because they don't understand, but because there's a lot of stuff that they cannot control. So they're very bad market players. So Portugal develops two things. One, the families can ask the Inquisition, can petition the Inquisition to administer the assets while someone is in prison in the name of the Inquisition, which is a very smart thing to do. Usually the Inquisition says yes, because they know that if the cousin or the brother is administering, that at least they will accrue value, and that will be paid, and so on. Or, secondly, that is alternatively, they ask the royal officials, os oficiais reais do reino, to come to the market to administer the assets. And in Portuguese historiography, this has been read as, oh, the king comes to administer. No, 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 no. The king is not administering anything. The Inquisition is paying these men, usually the harbor masters and the guys from the alfândegas and so on, to administer these assets because they don't know how to. So these are some clues, perhaps questions, to get a little bit out of the, I think, endless and continuous circle of looking at the Inquisition as a depredatory institution that it was, but it was not aleatory, right? So there are a lot of things that the Inquisition just can't do because they don't have the people. So my questions. Thank you.
Grazie, Katia. Well, I hope to understand all things. Well, if the Spanish Inquisition or the specifically Mallorcan Tribunal is efficient or is efficient? No, it's see. I think depend on the point of view, no, because it's efficient in it's right a lot thing, but there isn't good escape of the control. Maybe all the goods or the for example investment in vessels in chips. Sorry, it's possible. It's not interesting for there, but it's interesting in the annuities and the properties and the houses. That is all is control, but it's a big income. It's a lot of things. It's 1 million Mallorcan libras. It's 200 the goods of the 200 people, no, a person. It's a lot of things and in control. But and the difference, I think, Portugal maybe is the in Spanish tribunals is give all things, confiscate the goods, and then. But another tribunals is not this way. It's, the first is accused and condemned, and then confiscate. No, here and. We check that apart the annuities is sell in the market and the money pay the monarchy. A part of this good go to the monarchy. But in this sense, I think it's, the tribunal is efficient. Maybe there is a lot of bureaucracy. There is a lot, each person, each condemned have a book for the every year the enter and send the money. It's very controlled. I don't know. I think it's efficient for the age, no? Respect to the how start this process. Our ask about that because it's a big question, no? Is for the denuncias of the neighbors of the. For a long time, the Chueda having problems in Mallorca. 150 years having problems. But there is in 1630, more or less, informe Fontanal accused 50 years before, accused the practice of the Judaizantes for the Jewish community. But not happen anything. But in a moment, start. Maybe for the pressure of the monarchy or the new inquisitor arrived, I think, 5 years before, and is very ambitious and very corrupt, no? And I think it's a good business, no? For I don't know, no? In the third question is about the increase a lot the administration or the staff, because in this moment the Inquisition need invest a lot in prisons, new prisons. If I have a small prison, I need a lot houses I need more staff for the old 200 confiscation. No? It's a lot expensive, increased expensive. No, the amount increase or enter in the contability is a lot, but the expenses increase too. I think. No? Thank you very much.
Allora, abbiamo le ultime 2 domande, dobbiamo chiudere entro l'1, quindi vi raccomando la brevità. Marianne.
My question was similar to Katja, so I'm not really good. I mean, she gave far more detail about what was happening elsewhere in Iberia. So let me just make a short comment, which is that I do like the idea of induced bankruptcy and think that it is a useful concept to compare different strategies by state-sponsored institutions who are seeking to extract resources from minority groups. Obviously, I'm more familiar with the English situation and was struck both by the similarities. 13th century England expelled the Jews, but before that happened, there was an escalating series of strategies to extract money through forced loans, taxes, confiscations, fines, imprisonments. They used all these different strategies. The outcome was the crown got almost all the money, so it's somewhat in contrast to the situation you're talking about. There were fewer intermediaries, which is interesting in terms of comparison, but they ended by expelling all the Jews, and it's the expulsion that got the property, every single property and asset, and then there was a market to sell it. So I think that the concept of induced bankruptcy would be very conducive to a comparative perspective, because this is happening all over Europe in many centuries. So no need to answer, just I think that it's very useful, and I would hope a comparative perspective such as Katja suggests would be a next step.
Thank you. When we start to our project about not only the persecution of the Jews, if the origin of the wealthy of this community, we thought this the best way to explain this situation is about the persecution of the minority, the healthy minorities overall, no? And in this case, we thought is interesting the industries bankruptcy, because it's not a bankruptcy for the economic activity, no? Is in general is all places in all centuries the same. Is for economic situation. Is for now the explanation is for the institutional factors, and explain another. I agree. No, we agree about that. It's a concept perfect for other situation, for the persecution of the minority, the healthy minority. No, that is. Thank you.
Bene, allora Max.
I will be brief because I know people are tired at the end of the long day, but Marianne, like you, I was struck by this notion of induced bankruptcy. Unlike you, though, my immediate thought was, this isn't a bankruptcy. This is something very different. Bankruptcy has a specific form, it has a specific intent, and this is an expropriation. And so my question was, do your sources, your archival sources, use the term bankruptcy? Because if they do, I find that interesting. If they don't, it's still interesting, it's just different. And the second question links to many of the questions that you've been getting, and that has to do with the impact of this. We've had questions about what happens to the money, what happens to the real estate, where does it go, who gets it, who benefits from all of this? You know, the Inquisition hangs on to the real estate and rents it out. The financial instruments are used to discharge debts of various sorts. And I was struck by that, in particular when you talked about 219 families, almost 1 million libras in wealth, 73% in financial instruments, 50% of which are in the public debt. And I was reminded forcefully of the Japanese government response to the imposition of Trumpian tariffs, saying essentially, we hold $3 billion worth of the American public debt. You put these tariffs on us and we will dump the debt. We will dump these onto the market. The result would have been the immediate destruction of the bond market in the United States. Immediate. And so my question was, and if you can answer it, wonderful. If you can't, at least I think it's worth thinking about, is what is the impact of this on the large and Mallorcan economy? It seems to me that there must have been an economic caesura that went far beyond the Huete community. And I would be interested in knowing more about that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That is the question, no? What is the impact of the economy local or the economy, the commerce? Because a lot of these street merchants have a big relation with another merchant in Marseille or Amsterdam, no? Because the impact can be more than the economy, the Mallorcan economy, because this street have relationship between the solid coffers in Marseille, the other in Amsterdam, because the most important good in export the Mallorcans is olive oil export for these markets. And the problem is, until now, there is an studies about the different sector or market, no? I can, or we can explain in the insurance market because before I I studied the insurance market, no? And I saw the fall, the control, this market for the traders, because I study when start in 50 decades until the end of the century, and increase the control this person, no? This group, no? Because they have a interesting way, because it's most important in this community, the endogamic matrimonios? Marriage, sí, sorry. I forget. And it's an endogamic strategy in the endogamic marriage before the elite in this group. And this creative relationship or a network, economic network in the elite of these families, no? And control in different decades the insurance, control the exportation, the export of the oil, or control the investment, the public debt. And the problem is don't know the public debt. In general, there is a lot of gaps in the economic history in Mallorca. No? The problem, no. We try to explain, but there is a memorials or for example, the Conde de Montenegro go to the Madrid to explain this is a collapse for the economy, no? Because it's this group participate in a lot sector of the economy, but don't know the market depth, don't know the exportation, the sport, no, but it's difficult until now, no? But we try. Well, no?
Bene, allora è stata una mattinata molto intensa, ringrazio la nostra relatrice, tutti i relatori e niente, thank you all e ci vediamo nel pomeriggio.